Chapter 41. Ugh, this is also a Desert Eagle. It's a 50 caliber, but it's a special version. After hesitating, the shop assistant said to Jiang Hai, "Generally a 50 caliber Desert Eagle has a length of 270 millimeters. The barrel length is 250 millimeters. But this gun is specially made. The front part is heavier. It looks like the large pistols in the movies. It looks very awe-inspiring when you pick it up. Of course, the front part is heavier and the speed is increased. When you take it out, not only will it look awe-inspiring, but the most important thing is that the recoil will also increase." However, Jiang Hai took a fancy to this gun at first glance. "This is it. Take it out and let me try it later." Looking at this gun, Jiang Hai's eyes lit up and he said excitedly, "Okay." After hesitating for a moment, the shop assistant nodded when he saw Jiang Hai's excited look. It's not a big deal to add some protective gear for Jiang Hai. At least, his wrist can't be broken. However, Jiang Hai didn't have these thoughts. After choosing a pistol, he was ready to choose a shotgun and a large-caliber semi-automatic rifle. These two were easy to deal with. Rifles and automatic rifles were not allowed to be bought. The legendary M16 August AK, and so on were not allowed to be bought in the situation that Jiang Hai was familiar with. He could only buy those. The so-called semi-automatic rifle referred to a rifle that could only fire one bullet when the trigger was pulled. It was not the kind of rifle that could fire a string of bullets. There were also those high-powered sniper rifles such as AWP Barrett and so on. And the most important thing was that the maximum capacity of the rifle's magazine could not exceed 5 rounds. On the black market, a 30-round rifle magazine was more expensive than a gun because this gun could only be bought with 5 rounds. So, Jiang Hai wasn't really interested in these guns. In the end, with Luo Binxi's help, he chose a Remington M870P shotgun. The only advantage of this gun was that it could use deer bullets like a shotgun. Even if he went hunting in the future, this gun was not bad. In addition, he also chose an Austrian August. Although this gun was very expensive, it could be used as a semi-sniper rifle. It was suitable, so Jiang Hai also bought this gun. After choosing 3 guns, it was naturally time to test the guns. This was also considered a preliminary selection. If it wasn't suitable, he could casually change it. Testing the guns in the back of the gun shop in the United States also required payment, but it was very little. The target paper money was $2. 100 bullets were $30. $100 for a rifle. $100 was $20. The rental price was $10. It didn't matter how many times he could change the gun. In addition, there was also the money to rent the target. This shop was slightly more expensive. It was $30 an hour. In addition to the guidance and tips, Jiang Hai spent a total of $100. After paying the money, Jiang Hai also began to test the guns. It was his first time shooting a gun, so the first gun he shot was the August. After all, this gun was still equipped with a scope. It was also his first time touching a gun. If he missed too much, it would be a little embarrassing. So, he wanted to get a more accurate one. Under the guidance of the staff next to him, he used the most basic standing position and aimed at the target in front of him. Be careful when you shoot. This gun's recoil is also not small. Ping 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 ping. Before the staff could finish, Jiang Hai had already pulled the trigger. In an instant, the bullet had already flown straight to the paper target. In front of everyone's surprised eyes, the magazine of 5 bullets was emptied in an instant. In the middle of the paper target there were also 5 bullet marks. But of the 5 bullet marks, 3 were 8 rings, 2 were 7 rings, and there wasn't even a 9 ring. What a bad result. Putting down the gun, Jiang Hai looked at the 5 bullet holes in front of him and couldn't help but chuckle. However, what he didn't know was that his actions had given the people around him a shock. The staff just now and Luo Binxi were all paying attention to Jiang Hai. They were afraid that the recoil was too big and would hurt Jiang Hai. This would be troublesome. But unexpectedly, the recoil of the August didn't make Jiang Hai's body shake at all. Seeing this, Luo Binxi couldn't help but think of the scene when he went shopping with Jiang Hai. It seems that Jiang Hai's physical fitness is really terrifying. The body that doesn't look strong contains such a powerful force. It is indeed a bit scary. After trying the August, Jiang Hai tried the Remington, but this gun is a shotgun. Once it is shot, it will hit a large area. Even if it is set, the spray angle of the shot is 120 degrees. This gun is good for hunting, but it is far worse for ordinary use. But as Luo Binxi said, whether this gun is useful or not is another matter. It must be prepared. The last thing to use was the special Desert Eagle, a 50 caliber, which made the staff next to him nervous. They deliberately put protective gear on Jiang Hai before letting Jiang Hai try to shoot. After a few test shots, Jiang Hai did feel some recoil. It was basically twice as strong as the August, but it was still within his tolerance range. Then he removed the protective gear and shot with one hand. There was almost no aim. It was fine with two hands, but the power of this gun was much stronger than the August. Jiang Hai was quite satisfied with this. In the end, he chose these 3 guns along with the set and a lot of bullets. After spending a total of $20,000 on Jiang Hai, they also took these things and threw them into the back seat of the F-750. Okay, let's go back. Coming out of the gun shop again, Robbins couldn't help but stretch and said to Jiang Hai with a smile. Jiang Hai also had the same idea, but just as he was about to get in the car, he suddenly saw a small convenience store opposite the gun shop, but this store was different from the general convenience store. On the plaque there were 4 Chinese words, Zhang Family Store. A Chinese store? Seeing this store, Jiang Hai froze for a moment, and his pace of getting in the car couldn't help but slow down. Hey Jiang, what's wrong? On the other side, Robbins, who had already gotten in the car, looked at Jiang Hai and couldn't help but ask curiously. Oh, I'm going to buy something. Hearing Robbins' words, Jiang Hai chuckled and walked to the store. Welcome, please take a look. As soon as he walked in, a voice sounded next to him. Listening to the slightly unfamiliar English, Jiang Hai looked back and found that it was a girl who looked young, standing at the cashier and talking. Looking at the girl's appearance, she seemed to be Asian, and she had the feeling of being knowledgeable. Jiang Hai also nodded gently and then walked into the store. As soon as he walked in, he found that there were a lot of things in this store. Lao Gan Ma garlic chili sauce, bean sauce, sweet noodle sauce. This is really a Wuxia small supermarket. There are a lot of vegetables here. This is the rice from the northeast. Well, it smells good. After walking into the small store, Jiang Hai couldn't help but brighten up. There are really a lot of things here and they all reveal a friendly smell. Although Jiang Hai has been here for less than a month, to be honest, he is a little tired of eating Western food every day. Sometimes he wants to eat jjiang noodles, but there is no sauce to fry it with. You can't use ketchup to make it. It can't be made with ketchup. It can't be made with ketchup. This morning he just thought about it a little, but he didn't expect to see it being sold in the afternoon. For Jiang Hai, it is naturally a very happy thing, although the price of these sauces here is a bit sad. It is too expensive. Almost buying a bottle here, you can buy one when you go back, but there is no way. You can't let people send it from China. Therefore, Jiang Hai still didn't say anything. He carried a basket and began to pack it. First, he packed 2 bottles of Lao Gan Ma, then 4 bottles of garlic chili sauce, 4 bottles of bean sauce, in addition to soy sauce and vinegar that can rarely be bought in the United States. He also took a bag of 10 pounds of northeastern rice. Almost everyone in the world knows that the 3 best rice in the world are Japan, Korea, and the northeast of Wuxia. Originally, the northeast of Wuxia didn't grow rice. Just like the Song on Songhua River, there were soybeans and sorghum everywhere. When the Japanese invaded, they forced the northeasterners to grow rice. Later, the Japanese were defeated and left the northeast, but the northeasterners were still used to growing rice. Because the northeast has been a bitter and cold place since ancient times, the land is not as seriously overdrawn as the Central Plains. The black soil there is almost so rich that oil can be squeezed out. The yield of rice is high, and the taste is naturally excellent. Originally, there are 2 major planting areas in the northeast. One is Liao Province and the other is Heilong Province. However, later on, Liao Province developed heavy industry, causing serious pollution, and Heilong Province's rice is unrivaled. Among them, the most delicious rice is also the rice that the Heilong Province people eat. This rice is especially fragrant, and it has a chewy texture, overflowing with oil, and is very delicious. This kind of rice is sold for 3 or 4 yuan per pound in Heilong Province. If it is shipped to the south, the price will increase exponentially. In Shudi, it is sold for more than 80 yuan per bag and a bag of 10 pounds. Further south, in the 2 provinces, it is even sold for more than 10 yuan per pound. It is so expensive that it is somewhat outrageous. In the United States, the price of rice is naturally expensive. A bag of 10 pounds of rice is sold for $110. Well, this is no longer selling rice, this is selling gold. It is really so expensive that it makes people's hair stand up. However, Jiang Hai still bought a bag. After buying the rice and seasoning, Jiang Hai went to the vegetable section. In fact, most vegetables are also sold in the United States. Organic vegetables are still very good, but there are some more special vegetables that are not available here. For example, bamboo eggs, monkey head mushrooms, yams, and so on. They are rarely found in supermarkets in the United States, but they are all available here. Jiang Hai is a carnivore, so he doesn't care too much about vegetables. However, when he saw the pine mushroom not far away, he unconsciously swallowed a mouthful of saliva. Pine mushroom, not pine mushroom. Although the name is similar, it looks completely different. This kind of mushroom is a specialty of the Northeast in China. It is only found in the Northeast and its growth is very special. This kind of mushroom cannot be cultivated by humans. In other words, this kind of mushroom can only be found in the wild. Jiang Hai remembers that when he was young, he didn't like to eat mushrooms. However, later on his grandmother was sick, and his mother went back to take care of his grandmother. In the end, he and his father were at home. His father made pine mushrooms, and ever since he ate this kind of mushroom, he fell in love with this kind of mushroom. Today's first update, 2 chapters in a row. It is so good that it is recommended. The index rose by a few thousand in a day. Xiaofei is stunned. Chapter 42. When Jiang Hai was young, this kind of mushroom was very expensive. Jiang Hai remembered that at that time, pork was sold for more than 4 yuan per catty, and this kind of mushroom was sold for 5 yuan per catty. Since then, he said that he wanted to eat this kind of mushroom almost every year. But he hasn't eaten it for many years. It's really because this kind of mushroom has very few seasons. It starts to be picked in mid-July and ends at the end of August. Moreover, the growing conditions are extremely harsh. It only grows in mountainous areas where the temperature is higher than 32 degrees, it won't grow, and the humidity must reach 85%. With the increase of people's dietary requirements, the price of this kind of mushroom with excellent taste is constantly changing. At the same time, this kind of mushroom contains polyols, which can be used to fight cancer and treat diabetes. It also doubles the status of this kind of mushroom, plus it can't be cultivated, its price has always been high. Jiang Hai hasn't eaten it for at least a while. Now that he looks at it, he can't help but feel that the saliva in his mouth has increased. Although it's just work in front of him and the price is more expensive, he still decided to buy it all. Young man, what are you buying so many mushrooms for? Just as Jiang Hai was about to put away the mushrooms, an old man came from a distance. He looked at Jiang Hai strangely and asked with a curious face, "Sir, are you Chinese?" Listening to the old man speaking in pure Mandarin, Jiang Hai couldn't help but be stunned. Of course, 99% of the people who come here to buy things are Chinese. Hearing what Jiang Hai said, the old man chuckled and said, That's true. Sir, let me tell you, this kind of mushroom is called pine mushroom. It's a kind of wild mushroom and it's very delicious." Hearing the old man's words, Jiang Hai smiled awkwardly, but he still introduced it to the old man. "Oh, I've eaten this kind of mushroom before. The taste is really good, but you'll have diarrhea after eating it." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the old man here recalled and said with some fear, "Of course there's a layer of skin on it. You have to remove this layer of skin before you can eat it." Hearing the old man's words, Jiang Hai continued with a smile. Hearing what Jiang Hai said, the old man also fell into deep thought. It seems that he doesn't know. After buying the mushrooms, Jiang Hai thought for a while and bought a few iron rod yams, which can be eaten and played when he goes back. After buying these things, he was ready to pay the money, but he was stopped by the old man. "Young man, look at you buying so much sauce, rice and mushrooms. You are from the Northeast, right? This shop has a little stupid chicken, why don't you get a few?" Looking at Jiang Hai, the old man chuckled and said, "Chicken? Is reliable? There are also chicken in the United States?" The so-called stupid chicken was a free-range chicken raised in the countryside. Usually they were rarely fed with feed and would forage for their own food outside. This kind of chicken may not have eaten very well, so their size was basically not very big. At the same time, because they had been foraging for food everywhere, eating grass seeds and insects, the meat was very firm and there was almost no fat. The taste was quite good. Jiang Hai originally didn't like to eat chicken. He only ate chicken thighs and breasts, but after coming to the United States for so long, he really missed the taste of free-range chicken. "Oh, these are chickens. The boss of the shop specially brought them here from Wuxia and raised them in the United States. What do you think?" Hearing Jiang Hai's doubts, the old man said with a smile, "Oh, then you can have a look." Hearing the old man's words, Jiang Hai's eyes couldn't help but light up. If they are really chicken breeds from Wuxia and raised here, then the taste of the chicken should be good. Although the United States also eats chicken, the chicken breeds here are not very good. Basically, many of them are turkey skewers. Turkey is a toy. It's fat and big. To be honest, the meat is not delicious. It's okay to use it to fill one's stomach, but it's not good to enjoy it. So even in the United States, ordinary people will only eat some turkey during Thanksgiving and Christmas. At other times they won't eat these things. The chickens raised are also stupid. Other than having a lot of meat, there's nothing else. After saying a few words to the old man, Jiang Hai came to the place in the shop that specializes in selling fresh food. In addition to selling sea fish and beef, they also sell river fish. Because of the flood of river fish in the United States, and because no one catches them, it has become a disaster. The river fish here are very big and the quality is quite good. Strictly speaking, these fish are all wild fish. It's just that the people in the United States won't eat these fish. But Jiang Hai is different. These days he has been eating sea fish and is a little tired of it. Now that he suddenly saw river fish, he really wants to eat it. But he won't buy river fish here. After all, according to Luo Binci, river fish are a disaster in the United States. There's no need to buy this toy at all. Just go to the river and you can catch food in half an hour. There's no need to buy it. So Jiang Hai just took a look and then went to the side where the chickens are sold. When Jiang Hai saw the chickens, he can't help but nod secretly. These chickens weren't like the chickens raised in the United States. They basically only had one color. This chicken had many colors. Looking at the rooster's comb, it was obviously fully grown. However, the size of the chicken was only about 3 catties. This chicken is not bad. Pick a few. Looking at the chickens in front of him, Jiang Hai nodded. After picking 3 chickens and a basket of eggs, he didn't need to buy anything else. Anyway, this place is not very far. If he still needs to buy something in the future, he can just drive here again. According to his phone call a few days ago, in a few days, it will be the day of the driver's license test. At that time he can come and buy at any time. Carrying a lot of things, Jiang Hai went to the cashier. These things are good, but the price is really outrageous. Jiang Hai spent a total of more than $300. But no matter how expensive it is, he has to buy it, right? Uncle, aren't you going to buy anything? After buying the things, Jiang Hai can't help but look at the old man not far behind him. He has been seeing this old man walking around here and persuading him to buy so many things. Why didn't he buy anything? Me? This store is opened by my son. What do I buy? After listening to the old man's words, Jiang Hai almost couldn't breathe. Well, this is a minto, but there is nothing to say. One is willing to hit and the other is willing to be hit. If he didn't want to buy these things, he wouldn't have been persuaded to buy it, right? Finally, he smiled at the old man and Jiang Hai carried all the things out. Hey boss, why did you buy so many things? Seeing Jiang Hai in front of him, who was empty-handed when he went in, and came out holding such a big pile, even Robbins was stunned. It's nothing. These are all things from my hometown. Sometimes I get used to your Western food and I miss the taste of my hometown, right? Hearing Robin's words, Jiang Hai chuckled and said to him, if you really want to eat, you can go to the Chinese restaurant in town. The taste there is not bad. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Robbins was stunned and said to Jiang Hai, but Jiang Hai just shook his head. After being here for so long, how could he not go to a Chinese restaurant to eat? But to be honest, the catering industry is the same no matter where it is. In a place, in order to make money, you have to cater to the taste of this place. Otherwise, how can you make money? The same is true for the Chinese food in the United States. At this time, it has been changed beyond recognition. He went to Winthrop's restaurant to eat Chinese food. Almost every dish has ketchup, which is unacceptable. You don't understand. When I make it, you will know. Let's go. With a chuckle, Jiang Hai said to Robbins. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Robbins scratched his head. He really didn't understand, but whatever Jiang Hai said, he is the boss. He lifted the brake lightly and started the behemoth. With a roar, they sped toward Jiang Hai's ranch. It took an hour and a half to come, but when they left, because they didn't need to slow down or take a detour, they had already arrived at the gate of the manor in a little more than an hour. At this time, in front of the gate, Bob George was checking the condition of Jiang Hai's horses with Burke Dollar. The horses chosen by Robbins were naturally fine, but he was afraid that when they came here, it would be hard to say. So, Burke Dollar deliberately checked them again and there were no problems. These horses, are they okay? The car stopped beside Burke Dollar. Jiang Hai leaned against the window and said to Burke Dollar, Boss, there's no problem. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Burke nodded. Old Bob's horses were famous in the area, so there shouldn't be any big problems. If there really was a problem, then he wouldn't have run the ranch here for so long. Well, that's fine. I'll put the things back first. These horses, the biggest one is mine. You can divide the rest among yourselves. Hearing Burke's words, Jiang Hai smiled at old Bob and then motioned for Robbins to drive the car in first. After driving the car into the manor, Jiang Hai first took the gun and bullets and put them in an empty wardrobe in his room. There were 4 wardrobes in his room, but he only had 5 or 6 sets of his own clothes. Even if it was underwear, 1 wardrobe was not enough. He didn't know what to put in the 3 wardrobes that were originally empty. Now that there was space, one of them would be used for the gun. As for the bullets, they had to be separated from the gun. This was what Ross said. After putting the gun down, Jiang Hai went downstairs again, took the food down, and put it in his refrigerator. Finally, there were the chickens left, but as soon as he took down the chicken coop, the 2 dogs surrounded him. Shoo shoo shoo. This is my food, not yours. Looking at the fierce light in the eyes of the 2 dogs, Jiang Hai went up and kicked them, shouting at them loudly. Second update, please bookmark, recommend, click. Chapter 43. Woo woo. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the Caucasian Xiaobai couldn't help but make 2 very depressed sounds, then looked at Jiang Hai pitifully, but the green wolf mastiff Little Yellow just glanced at Jiang Hai, then turned and left. Seeing that Little Yellow had left, Xiaobai didn't stay any longer and left while looking back 3 times with every step. Boss, are you going to eat these chicks or raise them? At this time Luo Binsi also parked the car and walked out of the car. He looked at the 3 cages in Jiang Hai's hand and asked strangely. In fact, if it was in Wuxia, holding such a big chicken would naturally be used to eat, but in the United States, a chicken of about 3 catties was just a chicken for them. The general white feather chicken was at least 6 or 7 catties. Take the white feather chicken that Feng Kai Kai talked about every day as an example. When this chicken was 24 weeks old, it weighed about 5 catties. When it was 68 years old, it could reach 6 catties. This was only in Wuxia. The crossbreeding technology in the United States was so good and the output was higher. Otherwise, why do you think the hamburgers here were so cheap? So in their view, a chicken of 3 catties was really not in existence that could be eaten. Of course it's for eating. But hearing his words, Jiang Hai raised his eyebrows and said with a serious face. But such a small chicken, okay boss, do you want to kill it now? Although it was a little difficult to do it, Jiang Hai said that he wanted to kill it, then he was ready to do it. For these cowboys, killing chickens, cattle, and sheep was not a problem. Now, I'm not going to kill it now. After thinking for a while, Jiang Hai thought about it. It seemed that he was not going to kill it for the time being. Originally, he didn't want to buy a chicken. If it weren't for the old man next to him, he wouldn't have wanted to buy it. Now that he bought it back, it was easy to clean it up, but how to do it, he really didn't know. Then let's raise it first. It's so small there won't be much meat left after killing it. Hearing Jiang Hai's slightly hesitant words, Luo Binsi thought that Jiang Hai also felt that this chicken was too small, so he smiled and said to Jiang Hai. If he knew that this kind of chicken could only grow this big, his jaw would probably drop. Since he said that he wanted to raise them, he naturally had to make a chicken coop. For this kind of work, Robbins was quite good at it. According to him, he could get some planks on the ground and make a small chicken coop. Then he could use the wood to make a small cabin and hang a fishing net on it. These chickens would not be able to go out and it would be easy to catch them. Speaking of wood, there was a forest nearby. Over the years, Robbins had also saved a lot of wood. Making a chicken coop was not a problem. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but brighten up. This is also a good idea. Hey boss, the horses you bought this time are really great. They are all adult quartz. You know, the maintenance of such a horse is much more expensive than buying a car. Only you have the courage to buy 6 of them at once. At this moment, Philemon walked over with a smile on his face. He and Burke had just driven the horses back to the stable. In the next few days, not only would they have to take care of the cows, they would also have to take care of the horses. These horses were all adult horses, so they were much easier to take care of. They only needed a few days to get used to the colts. When the cows were about to go out to graze, these horses would be ready to be used. Of course, boss is the most generous boss I have ever seen. Robbins heard Philemon's words and said. Although Jiang Hai knew that they were flattering him, he still felt comfortable listening to it. After all, in the past he was the only one who flattered others. When did others flatter him? By the way boss, my wife asked me what you want to eat later. Do you want fried steak, fried fish, stewed beef, or stewed lamb? Is it okay if the staple is white bread? Seeing Jiang Hai's expression, Philemon didn't forget his real purpose of coming here and asked Jiang Hai. But when he heard about the food, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smack his lips. Although he didn't dislike these foods, he really couldn't stand eating them every day. After thinking for a moment, Jiang Hai knew that foreigners didn't understand the twists and turns of Wuxia, so he directly told the truth. Tell your wife that I want to change the taste today. She doesn't need to cook for me tonight. Then boss, what do you want to eat? I'll go back and tell her. Philemon was stunned when he heard Jiang Hai say that he wanted to change the taste. No, you don't need to tell her. I'll give her a day off today. The food I want to eat is not something you can cook. It's my hometown food. Shaking his head, Jiang Hai didn't want Mrs. Philemon to try the improved Huaxia food. It was better for him to do his own research. Of course, he was just making this meal for a change. Since he was here, he had to learn to adapt. Oh, is that so? Then what do you want to use for your hometown food? I'll help you find it. Hearing Jiang Hai say that he wanted to cook his hometown food, Philemon couldn't help but smile and said to Jiang Hai excitedly, "No need, I want to make river fish. You don't want to eat it? Since you're here, help me make this chicken coop." Hearing Jiang Hai say river fish, Robbins and Philemon couldn't help but frown and then smile awkwardly. They had heard that Huaxia people liked to eat river fish. But to them, river fish really wasn't delicious. First, it had a lot of bones. Americans who liked to eat meat weren't used to eating fish like that. Second, river fish had an earthy smell. Some people liked fishy smells, but they didn't want to eat earthy smells. These people were like that, so they hated the smell of these fish. Of course, there was also a third reason. It was said that a few decades ago the United States was like China now. They had been doing development and construction, so the pollution of the river and land was very serious. Later, the American government started to pay attention to these things and slowly improved. But the old people of that era still passed down the idea that the fish in the river were unclean. He told his son, and his son told his grandson. From the very beginning, these people thought that the fish in the river were unclean. That was why the freshwater fish in the river were overflowing like this in the United States now. No one would eat these fish. Even if the government came up with more reports to tell these people that there was no problem with these fish, they still wouldn't eat it. But it was said that the West Coast had started to catch these fish. After they were dried, they were sent to Huaxia. In China, wild fish were very popular, but dead fish, no matter how wild they were, couldn't be sold for a high price. This was inevitable. In fact, in Jiang Hai's opinion, this problem was actually very easy to solve. They only need the United States to send a batch of visa-free people to China. In those places where freshwater fish were affected, they can build some small villas and rent them out cheaply to Chinese tourists. They can also freely cook and fish. In less than a year, it is estimated that all the fish in the 5 Great Lakes will become extinct. Not to mention the problem of Asian carp, they can also make some extra money. Of course, the problem between countries wasn't so easy to solve. If Jiang Hai's words were useful, he wouldn't be talking nonsense here. Although they weren't interested in river fish, the two of them were still good at doing things. With Jiang Hai's help, a simple small chicken coop was built in less than an hour. They covered it with a broken fishing net and that was it. Jiang Hai let the 3 chickens in through the door. The 3 chickens quickly ran into the coop and began to look at their new home curiously. However, the brains of chickens were limited. After a while, they began to walk outside to look for food. As for Jiang Hai, he rode the empty all-terrain vehicle and left the manor with his fishing rod. When it came to sea fishing, Jiang Hai wasn't good at it. But when it came to fishing, he was still quite confident. Boston was the largest city in New England. It was also the main colonial city of the United Kingdom when the United States was first established. The reason why the British chose this place was mainly because of its well-developed water conservancy. To the west was Massachusetts Bay, which was connected to the Atlantic Ocean. Not only was the land close to the sea, but the freshwater resources were also very rich. Although there were only 2 named rivers, the Charles River and the Chelsea Creek, the Charles River wasn't big. Its total length was only 192 kilometers. It could be completed by driving for more than an hour. It was indeed not big. There were many waterways here. They were all freshwater waterways, but they didn't have names. They weren't even marked on Google Maps. But if you really came here, you would find that this was indeed a freshwater river. At this time, the freshwater rivers in the United States were going through many tests. The biggest test was the invasion of the Asian carp. In fact, the so-called Asian carp didn't refer to the carp that people often talked about. In addition to carp, there were silver carp, bighead carp, crucian carp, snakehead carp, and so on. There were a series of fish species. In Huaxia, Jiang Hai preferred to call these fish river fish. When it came to fishing, he wasn't good at it. But when it came to catching these fish, he could be considered half an expert. After all, in Huaxia's rivers, people who could catch wild fish and still have a good harvest had skills that could be imagined. In the north of Jiang Hai's manor, it was less than half an hour's walk and about 10 minutes ride by bike. There was a freshwater river. Jiang Hai had passed by this place before. There were quite a lot of fish there. Jiang Hai always had a lot of ideas about these fish. But when he heard that fishing from the sea was indeed more interesting than fishing from the river, he could at least look forward to the fish that he caught. But when he thought about his fishing skills and the dishes that he was going to cook tonight, Jiang Hai stopped thinking about it. As a boss, he couldn't always have no harvest. Today's update was delivered continuously. There's still one more update in the middle of the night. I'm currently ranked 18th on the list. Damn, it's already out on the 9th. This might be the first time since Xiao Fei started writing that he hasn't posted 200,000 words in a month. The world of online novels is changing too quickly. Today as I was writing, I suddenly looked up and realized that I've already written more than 110 chapters. I've saved up 200,000 chapters. When it's time for it to be published, it'll probably be very popular. I hope everyone can support Xiao Fei. Chapter 44. Fishing rod, fishing line, fishing hook, float, bait will catch earthworms. The fish here are not small. They probably like to eat these things. There are also chairs, fish cages, nets, soft boxes. Well, that's it. In fact, if you don't fish, you really don't know. Fishing is actually a more troublesome thing. It's okay to use a fishing rod in the river, but it's even more troublesome to fish in the sea. Jiang Hai didn't know how to fish before. Now that no one has time to guide him, he doesn't intend to fish in the sea. If he goes back empty-handed, it would be too ugly, so now he wants to go to the river to fish for freshwater fish. Generally speaking, fishing in the river, there are more opportunities to use a fishing rod. The so-called fishing rod is a fishing rod without a reel. The length varies between 3 meters to 8 meters, mainly divided into two kinds of glass fiber and carbon. Jiang Hai used to use glass fiber. This kind of fishing rod is very heavy and easy to break, but it is extremely hard. It is known as the fighting rod of the fishing rod. Of course, it doesn't refer to fishing but to fighting. It is even better than a baseball bat when fighting. This rod, to be honest, is used by beginners among beginners. Basically, few people use it, but Jiang Hai used it before, not because he is a beginner but because this kind of rod is very cheap. The 4-meter pole only cost 25 yuan. It was really suitable for him. Moreover, it was impossible for them to catch big fish by the river in Heilong province. Such a pole was enough. Ever since he had money, he had specially bought a good pole. When he came this time, he also brought a carbon rod, but it is not much lighter than the glass rod because this rod is particularly long, 11 meters long. It is specially made by him. Ordinary fishing rods are rarely more than 10 meters long. Jiang Hai's is an exception. In addition to the thickest line and a large fishing hook, Jiang Hai put these things on an all-terrain vehicle and drove away from the manor. The place where Jiang Hai wants to fish, to be precise, should be regarded as the location of the estuary. However, the flow was not large. There were no large rivers in Boston, and the flow of water was not too fast. Of course, during storms and blizzards, it was different because the awareness of environmental protection here was very strong, and the growth of water plants was also very rich. After about 5 minutes of riding out of the manor, Jiang Hai saw the river. He stopped and walked for about half an hour before he picked a place. There were no big waves and it was relatively clean. Most importantly, there was less grass, so it was easier to take care of. After picking a place, Jiang Hai went to park the car and then took everything out of the car. Jiang Hai took out a small shovel that he had specially brought and started digging. In the US, they didn't pay attention to digging earthworms. Hence, there were a lot of earthworms. They were long and thick and looked like little monsters. However, Jiang Hai liked them quite a lot. It should be quite fun to fish with them. Not long after, he dug out half a box of earthworms. He didn't need to do anything. He just squeezed the mud and hung it on the hook. As Jiang Hai prepared everything, he swung the fishing rod and the hook flew out quickly and landed in the middle of the river. Fishing like this is still the most comfortable. Although sea fishing is fun, it's too much of a scam. Jiang Hai chuckled and tested the fishing rod. After making sure that the fish floated up, he slowly sat down and said with a chuckle. Jiang Hai let out a long breath and put the fishing rod on his lap. He breathed in the fresh air nearby. In fact, if there was one thing that he was most satisfied with in the US, it was undoubtedly the air here. The air in the city was better than the air in the countryside of Wuxia. In such a rural place, the air quality was almost the same as the air quality in the deep mountains and forests of Wuxia. There was almost no pollution. For Jiang Hai, this was a good place for natural lung cleansing. Clang clang. However, just as Jiang Hai was enjoying this beautiful nature, the fishing rod in his hand suddenly flew forward. If it wasn't for Jiang Hai's recent reaction speed, he might not have been able to react. But now, how could he be polite? He immediately grabbed the fishing rod firmly in his hand and then wanted to lift it up. But as soon as he exerted force, he was shocked. Because the situation of the fishing rod being lifted up in an instant didn't happen. Instead, it almost didn't move, but the fishing rod suddenly bent. This gave him a fright. One must know that he wasn't using the fishing rod that day, but a real fishing rod. This thing is easy to break. He was so scared that he immediately loosened his grip. After trying it, he was sure that the fishing rod had bitten the hook. Because the fishing line was moving but it couldn't be lifted up. Then there was only one possibility: he caught a big fish. That's impossible. How can there be a big fish here? Jiang Hai muttered softly while fishing. Logically speaking, even a grass root of about 3 caddies couldn't bend the fishing rod like this. Could it be a fish of more than 3 caddies? Jiang Hai didn't know if there were fish of more than 3 caddies in the river, but at least he hadn't seen one before. Driven by curiosity, Jiang Hai slowly pulled the fish over. The great strength and experience here helped Jiang Hai a lot. As the fishing rod slowly stood up, the shadow of a fish also appeared in front of Jiang Hai. This is a carp? F*ck, it's a little too big. Seeing the situation of the fish, Jiang Hai couldn't help but curse secretly. At this time in Jiang Hai's eyes, the carp was very, very big. It was about 1 meter long and very wide. The big scales on its body were even bigger than a child's fist. Carps were different from other fish. Other fish, if the fish were big, they would have more scales. Carps were different. Regardless of the size of a carp, unless it was injured, as long as it was a complete fish, it would have a rib scale. From head to tail there were 36 scales. The fish was big, the scales would be big. The fish was small, the scales would be small. The reason why it was called a carp was because there were cross-shaped patterns on its scales. At the same time there were small black dots on each scale. This carp was an out-and-out big fish. Jiang Hai's eyes couldn't help but light up when he saw it. Just this fish alone is enough for me to eat. Seeing the fish in front of him, Jiang Hai chuckled and couldn't help but swallow a mouthful of saliva. He couldn't help but secretly speed up his fishing speed. Soon this huge carp was pulled to the shore by Jiang Hai. With a sweep of the net, this big fish was directly caught on land. On land, the fish's wild nature was reflected. This fish had no natural enemies in the rivers of the United States, so perhaps it was used to being wild from birth. After landing, it began to flop continuously, wanting to jump back into the river. Fortunately, Jiang Hai's eyes were sharp and his hands were quick. He went up and kicked it to the side. F*ck, this fish is strong. Jiang Hai couldn't help but chuckle when he saw that the carp was still jumping wildly after being kicked away. Such a wild fish, if he made a pot of stewed fish in an iron pot at night, the taste would probably be tsk. Thinking of this, Jiang Hai's hands were even faster. He took the hook out of the fish's mouth immediately. The earthworm was gone at this time, only a bare hook was left, but this was enough. Jiang Hai didn't expect to use the bait many times. He grabbed the carp's cheek and washed it in the water. He had to admit that this fish was really strong. When it touched the water, it almost shook Jiang Hai into the water. If it was an ordinary person they might not be able to do it, but Jiang Hai was obviously not an ordinary person. After forcibly stabilizing his body, Jiang Hai fished the fish out of the river and then threw it into the fish box that had been prepared long ago. However, when he put it in, Jiang Hai couldn't help but scratch his head because this fish box wasn't very big originally. It was only about 1.2 meters. Now that he put in a 1 meter long fish, it was already full and couldn't fit any other fish. Troublesome. Sighing helplessly, Jiang Hai looked at the time. From the time he appeared until now, it had only taken him less than an hour. Originally he was hoping to spend the whole afternoon here, but now it seems that was impossible. If he continued to fish, he couldn't fit any more fish in, so he might as well leave like this. After thinking about it, Jiang Hai threw the remaining earthworms on the ground, then packed up his fishing gear and prepared to leave. But before he left, a sudden roar of an engine sounded, and then a motorcade came from Winthrop. To be exact, it was a motorcade composed of 2 cars and 4 motorcycles. Originally, Jiang Hai thought that these people were probably passing by on their way to Boston, but he didn't expect that after these people saw Jiang Hai's figure from afar, they actually turned the steering wheel and rushed directly toward Jiang Hai. Looking at the motorcade coming over, Jiang Hai frowned slightly. His sixth sense told him that these people might not come with good intentions, but was he a kind person? He only hoped that these guys would be more open, otherwise Jiang Hai wouldn't mind teaching them how to behave. Just as Jiang Hai's thoughts were spinning, these cars also stopped. It happened to form a half-moon shape, and together with the river they surrounded Jiang Hai in the middle. Jiang Hai also packed up the things inside and put them behind his all-terrain vehicle, then raised his head and looked at these people in front of him. Oh, isn't this our mysterious rich man from the east? You didn't even bring your dog out today, you really made a mistake. Just as Jiang Hai wanted to see what these people were here for, the door of one of the cars opened and a person came out. This person was wearing a cowboy hat on his head, but his clothes were a bit gaudy, similar to the hip-hop people in the city. When Jiang Hai saw this person, he immediately understood. Originally he was still surprised. After he came here, he didn't seem to have offended anyone, so why did these people come to find him? After seeing him, Jiang Hai understood that this person was none other than the guy who was scolded by him in the bar and dared to threaten him. Now it seems that this guy is here to fulfill his promise. My dog. You speak as if you have seen it before. If you have something to say it quickly. I still have to go back to eat. When he heard this person's words, Jiang Hai's first reaction was to be stunned. Speaking of the dog, the first thing he thought of was Xiao Bai and Little Huang, but it seemed that these people shouldn't know about his dog. Then he remembered that he might be referring to Luo Binci and the others. However, since he had already said it, it was not good to go back on it. Let's be tough to the end. Today's second update. There is one more update at midnight. After 12 o'clock, looking for all kinds of data, please support. Chapter 45. Our Wuxia rich people are really aggressive. Okay, since you're so stubborn, then I'll be straightforward. I'm a little short on money recently. I want to borrow some money from you. We're all neighbors. I guess you won't refuse me. Seeing that Jiang Hai still dared to be so stubborn in the middle of the encirclement, Faraday Wilson on the opposite side couldn't help but be stunned for a moment. It seems that this guy hasn't figured out the situation yet. On Faraday's side, including him, there were a total of 11 people, but there was only one on Jiang Hai's side. 11 against 1. Where did Jiang Hai's confidence come from? At this time he seemed to be sure that Jiang Hai was just pretending. The playful expression on his face was even more prominent. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with you, so I don't want to lend you. With a disdainful chuckle, Jiang Hai replied without thinking. Hearing his words, the people on this side couldn't help but look at each other, and then they laughed. Oh, it's a pity, yellow-skinned monkey. You don't really think that Faraday is negotiating with you, right? If you really think so, then I'll put it another way. This is a robbery, take out the money. After laughing, another white man next to Faraday grinned and said to Jiang Hai with a fierce face. Oh, I understand now, but unfortunately I'm not going to give you money. On the contrary, you've delayed me for so long. You have to compensate me for some loss, white pig. Shaking his head, Jiang Hai spread his hands and looked at these people with a face that deserved a beating. The index fingers of both hands were also erected at the first moment. The contemptuous remarks and expression were even more irritating to these people. After these people heard Jiang Hai's words, they couldn't help but stare. This was because Jiang Hai's current situation didn't seem to follow the rules. Originally, before coming here, they had already considered Jiang Hai's reaction. First, he would give the money honestly. Second, he would delay time and say that he had no money, but this way they could also beat him up and ask for money in the future. Third, he would fight to the end and call the police or call Robbins and ask them to come and save him. Fourth, it was to fight with them. The only thing they didn't consider was that Jiang Hai didn't seem to put these people in his eyes at all. They were too arrogant. Who was the one robbing whom? And he dared to stand on the territory of the United States and call them white pigs. This guy, he's looking for death. Thinking of this, these people couldn't help but look at each other. They got out of the car directly. They looked at Jiang Hai with a ferocious face, but Jiang Hai was still just standing there, looking at them with a smile on his face as if he didn't know their intentions. F***CKU. Seeing Jiang Hai's smile at this time, a white man finally couldn't help but punch Jiang Hai's face directly. Unfortunately, the moment his fist was about to touch Jiang Hai's face, a hand blocked the front of his fist, and Jiang Hai's smiling face also became cold at this time. You guys started it first, then I'm going to fight back. Looking at these people, Jiang Hai said faintly. Who the F***CK, let go, I'll give you back your old wood. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the man whose fist was grabbed shouted loudly without saying a word. At the same time he kicked Jiang Hai's stomach, but Jiang Hai was faster. His right foot kicked, instantly hitting the guy's knee. The huge force kicked the guy's leg in a half circle. When the guy finally stood up, Jiang Hai's hand began to exert force, making him see his fist being pulled back bit by bit. Seeing this scene coupled with the pain from his arm, the white man couldn't help but scream. Let's go together. Seeing that his helper was subdued by Jiang Hai, Faraday couldn't help but be stunned. Then he shouted, waved his hand and rushed directly toward Jiang Hai with his men. When Jiang Hai saw this, the corners of his mouth couldn't help but curl up slightly. His right hand exerted force in an instant, and only a crisp sound was heard. The white man's arm had been twisted by Jiang Hai, and the white man naturally lost his fighting strength in an instant. He rolled on the ground with his arm in his arms, and tears and snot flowed down in an instant. Speaking of which, these little punks were just punks. They were not soldiers, desperados, or athletes. This kind of pain had long exceeded their tolerance. If they didn't faint from the pain, even if they could endure it, how could they continue to fight? But unfortunately, at this time, no one paid attention to this guy because Jiang Hai had already rushed over and started fighting with these people. Jiang Hai's physical fitness was the current limit of human physical fitness. Although it did not exceed human physical fitness, it was far from what these people could compare to. Of course, his current combat experience was not good. Now that he was fighting 1 against 10, he was a little guilty. But at this time the arrow was on the bow and it had to be released. With his identity as a rich man, he had 1,000 ways to play these guys to death if they were not face to face, but now they were face to face and Jiang Hai was unwilling to admit defeat, so it could only depend on whose fist was harder. Quang. With a sound, Jiang Hai made the first move. He came in front of Faraday and kicked him directly in the chest. The huge force formed an echo in his chest, causing him to fly straight out. At the same time, he knocked down the 3 people behind him. Before these people had time to get up, Jiang Hai turned around and attacked to the left. Although Jiang Hai did not practice fighting, he also knew that if he was not ruthless, then he would be the one to fall in a while. So now he was playing with his eyeballs and he was going for the kill. Looking at the ruthless punk on the left, Jiang Hai went up and punched directly on his nose. The touch from his fingers told Jiang Hai that the other party's nose could not be saved from this punch. Smashing it into pieces was considered light. And this person was also directly hit by this punch. After lying on the ground, he directly fainted. Although this punch had crippled one person, Jiang Hai had used all of his strength. After this punch, he had also lost his center of gravity. At this moment, the people on the other side had already rushed over, throwing punches and kicks at Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai protected his head, and after taking 5 punches and 3 punches, he found an opening. He endured the 2 people coming from behind him, and with a kick, he threw himself in front of the 3 people. A right hook landed on the face of the person on the right. The huge force directly sent the person flying off the ground, and he crashed into the person next to him. Together they left the battle circle. Jiang Hai took advantage of this opportunity to grab the hoodlum who was still attacking him. Without saying a word, he went up and heavily smashed his head into the guy's head. But how could Jiang Hai's strength be compared to an ordinary person's? This person had no protection at all. He was immediately hit and fell back with a face full of blood. At this moment, Jiang Hai's body was punched and kicked again. He turned around and used his right hand to grab the right leg of the hoodlum who was kicking him from behind. At the same time, he kicked the other hoodlum and sent him flying. Then he used the fingers of his left hand to hit the hoodlum's knee. With a crisp crack, this person's knee was already like a dog's, unconsciously bending inwards. Hugging his leg, this person suddenly lost his balance and fell heavily to the ground. At this time, Faraday and the others who were kicked away first also stood up. They looked at the 4 people who were already disabled. The only ones who were not disabled were the one who was also smashed away just now and the one who was kicked away by Jiang Hai. These 4 people could not help but feel a little scared. They were still wondering why this Jiang Hai was not afraid of death. He even dared to fight with them in such a situation. However, they did not expect that it was not that Jiang Hai was not afraid of death, but that he was not afraid of them at all. So what if it was 1 against 11? It was not like he could not beat them. Seeing this, these punks were already a little shocked. You guys go, I'll go to the car to get the weapons. Seeing these people's appearance, Faraday roared for the first time. Hearing his words, these punks hesitated for a moment and rushed over. It was not that they did not want to go back to get the weapons, but Jiang Hai had already beaten the 2 people down while they hesitated. One of them seemed to have a broken arm. Although the other's arm was not broken, after being beaten down by Jiang Hai, he added another kick to the chest. The huge force kicked this guy until he was now spurting blood. Unsurprisingly, his internal organs were injured and most of his ribs were probably broken. If the 4 of them went back to get the weapons now, none of them would be able to escape, so they could only bite the bullet. Looking at the 3 people who rushed over again, Jiang Hai licked the blood from the corner of his mouth. After dealing with these 6 guys, Jiang Hai was not unscathed. In fact, with his current physical fitness, as long as he had some knowledge of fighting, these people would probably be lying on the ground at this time. But the problem was that he did not know how to fight. If he just took the hit, he would be beaten up. Fortunately, he had been protecting his head, so his face was only punched, but this punch was enough to make the corner of his mouth bleed. For such a superficial injury, Jiang Hai did not care. Looking at the 3 people rushing in front of him, Jiang Hai did not intend to let them go. With a stomp of his foot, his body shot towards the 3 people like a cannonball. Both of his fists punched out, and almost at the same time, it hit the chests of the two people on his left and right. The huge force directly sent the two people flying. At this time, the gangster in front of him didn't pay attention to the situation of his friends. He kicked towards Jiang Hai's lower body. He was also ready to kill. Even if he really kicked Jiang Hai, being locked up in prison for a few years was better than being beaten up here and having his bones broken. Seeing this scene, Jiang Hai's brain turned quickly. When the other party's foot kicked over, he suddenly jumped up and dodged his foot. The tip of his right elbow immediately fell from above and smashed heavily on the guy's head. The huge force made Jiang Hai clearly hear the cracking sound, but he did not know if the skull was broken or the cervical vertebra was broken. If it was the former, then he could still live. If it was the latter, even if he lived, it would be a fate worse than death. This week's first update: there are still 2 days before the rankings are released. Everyone help to work harder. Little Faye's request is not high. Please let Little Faye be on the front page before the rankings are released. It doesn't matter what rank as long as he is on it. Chapter 46. Who the F***ck? Who the F***ck? Who the F***ck? Looking at Jiang Hai on the other side, who had already taken care of the people he brought, Faraday Wilson was really anxious. He cursed as he opened the trunk of his car with his trembling right hand. As his trunk opened, an 80% new M16 appeared in the air. This M16 did not have a magazine, but there was no doubt that the gun was here, and the magazine was not far away. Faraday hurriedly looked at the 5-round magazine in front of him and immediately installed it. Although it was also a civilian gun, no one would be so naive to think that a civilian gun could not kill. After installing the magazine and pulling the bolt, Faraday was already anxious because Jiang Hai had already taken care of the last person. Now Faraday could not care so much. He only had one thought now, and that was to get rid of Jiang Hai. If he killed Jiang Hai directly, then he and Jiang Hai would be unlucky. After all, the arrow was already on the bow, and there was no choice but to release it. At that moment he secretly shouted and directly picked up the gun, ready to get rid of Jiang Hai. Go to hell. Hearing Faraday's shout, Jiang Hai immediately focused his attention on him. When Jiang Hai saw the gun handle exposed when he pulled out the gun, his eyelids could not help but twitch. Although his physical fitness now had reached the limit of a human, to say that he wanted to take a bullet head-on? That was simply impossible. If the bullet came, he would also die. He really did not expect that the punks in the United States were all gunfighters. In the midst of panic, Jiang Hai's brain was working quickly. He first looked at whether it would work if he attacked Faraday now. However, after thinking about it, he did not have the skills to dodge bullets. He did not think that he could dodge bullets, so this would not work. The second point was to find a way to attack from a distance and make this guy lose his combat ability. However, the best way to attack from a distance was with a gun, but now that Jiang Hai did not have a gun, he could only use something else. At this moment he saw a motorcycle next to him. On the motorcycle there was a safety helmet. As soon as he saw this thing, Jiang Hai's eyes couldn't help but light up. He stepped on the ground and instantly came to the side of the motorcycle. With a lift of his foot, the motorcycle's helmet was lifted into the air by him. Without saying a word, he directly shot the helmet away. This period of time was very troublesome, but in fact it was less than 2 seconds. It was not an exaggeration to say that it was a flash of light. At this time, Faraday had just raised his gun, and the helmet was already shot by Jiang Hai. When he used his eyes to look for Jiang Hai, he couldn't find Jiang Hai, but a red helmet came into view. The helmet didn't spin at all. With a loud bang, it hit the guy's face, causing blood to splatter everywhere. In the gap, a few teeth also flew out. Faraday only felt that his brain was in a daze, then he was shot and fell down weakly. Watching the last Faraday fall, Jiang Hai couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. It was a close call. Just now, his mind was highly concentrated and Jiang Hai didn't feel anything, but now that he relaxed, he felt that his whole body was in pain and he was a little weak. The place where he was hit was also aching. He was too careless this time. What should I do now? Should I call the police? Looking at the guys lying on the ground in front of him, Jiang Hai muttered in a low voice. Catch, catch, catch. But he didn't need to call the police. At this moment, a harsh alarm rang. Like the police in China, the police in the United States generally only appear after the matter is over. 6 or 7 police cars came in a row and stopped in front of Jiang Hai's outermost encirclement. When the police who got out of the car saw the miserable scene in front of them, the police who got out of the car and were strolling around suddenly became serious. Squat on the ground and put your hands on your head. Unlike the police in China need to apply for a gun, but in the United States, this is the standard configuration. These police have already raised their guns and pointed them at Jiang Hai and his group in front of them. Police, police, help me, call an ambulance. Seeing the police coming, the people who were scared by Jiang Hai's force just now, who were still conscious, covered their wounds and screamed. Hearing their screams, the police also walked in immediately. When they saw the people lying on the ground and Jiang Hai sitting there, their faces were quite ugly. Don't move, put your hands on your head. Most of the police went to check around and then immediately reported to the hospital. As for the other 3 police officers, they walked in front of Jiang Hai and pointed their guns at Jiang Hai, fearing that Jiang Hai would go berserk. I'm tired, it's up to you. Glancing at the 3 police officers, Jiang Hai said faintly. Hearing Jiang Hai say that he was tired, the 3 police officers looked at each other. One of them put away his gun and picked up the handcuffs to handcuff Jiang Hai. This time Jiang Hai didn't do anything else. This didn't mean that he was willing to be arrested, but now he was really tired, and most importantly, if he ran now, these police officers might really shoot him. And this matter, in essence, was not his responsibility. At most, he was just defending himself. After all, it was 1 against 11 and the other party even took out a gun. Even if he killed people, it was self-defense and it didn't constitute excessive self-defense. So in essence, he was the plaintiff and naturally he wasn't afraid of this. After being handcuffed, Jiang Hai was stuffed into the police car by 2 police officers. Not long after, the ambulances also came. 7 ambulances came at once. After these people were packed away, the police also escorted Jiang Hai back to the police station. Then Jiang Hai was stuffed into an interrogation room by them. The people in charge of interrogating him were 2 young police officers, a man and a woman. The woman looked to be in her 20s and she should have just started working not long ago. The man on the other side looked older, but his eyes were actually fixed on this woman. It could be seen that this man was interested in this woman, but this woman didn't seem to have any feelings for this man. Name. After the policewoman glanced at Jiang Hai, she said to Jiang Hai in a businesslike manner. Jiang Hai. Gender, male, age 27 years old, citizen of the United States, or do you have a green card? After memorizing the basic information, the woman raised her head and looked at Jiang Hai coldly. I have a green card, an investment green card. Otherwise, I wouldn't have come in with you. Looking at the woman, Jiang Hai also said lightly. You brat, be honest with me. Say what you're asked. If I don't ask you, what the hell are you talking about? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the woman couldn't help but frown. Seeing the woman frown, the male police officer next to her didn't care about anything else and scolded him first. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but be stunned for a moment. He had always heard that the police in the United States were quite civilized. Relatively speaking, now it seems that their temper is quite bad. But if Jiang Hai was an ordinary citizen, maybe he could endure it. But the problem now is that he is not an ordinary citizen, so he sat up straight and looked at the 2 people in front of him indifferently. If you don't understand, then don't say anything. Watch him, I'll go verify his identity. When the woman heard the words of the person next to her, her frown deepened. The reason why she frowned just now was mainly because of what Jiang Hai said just now. He was an investment immigrant. And looking at his appearance, it was clear that he wasn't a white-collar worker in Boston. After all, when they caught him, only the all-terrain vehicle belonged to him. If he really lived in Boston, it was obvious that the car couldn't have driven here. This proved that Jiang Hai should be a resident nearby, but the East Coast was not like the West Coast. There were many Wuxia investment businessmen there, but near Boston, especially near Winthrop County, there seemed to be no Chinese investment immigrants. If she remembered correctly, the only recent investment immigrant project seemed to be Green Forest. If this Jiang Hai is really the boss of Green Forest, then they need to pay attention to some of the way of handling the case. After all, in the United States, the people who can't be offended are the rich, and the boss of Green Forest is undoubtedly the model of the rich. Okay, don't worry. Hearing the girl's words, the man here also said with a smile. After watching the woman leave, he sat back in his seat and looked at Jiang Hai with a playful face. Looking at Jiang Hai's young age, the clothes on his body are not very expensive. Thinking of this, the man's eyes turned. Do you know how serious your problem is this time? Looking at Jiang Hai, the man said with disdain. I don't know. Looking at the man, Jiang Hai also smiled. He wanted to see what the man had to say. You don't know? Well, to be exact, 3 of them had their arms broken, 2 of them had their legs broken, and 4 of them had their ribs broken. 2 of them had suffered severe blows to their faces. The lighter one had a concussion and a broken nose. The more severe one had a concussion, along with intracranial hemorrhage, a broken facial bone, and 7 of his teeth. TSK, you're really ruthless. Just these crimes alone are enough to put you in prison for decades. In the United States, there are very few death sentences. Of course, it is not completely non-existent, but more often than not, it is imprisonment. Of course, compared to the suspended death sentence of 15 years in China, the upper limit of the sentence in the United States is much higher. Decades, centuries, and even thousands of years are possible. It seems like a prison sentence, but it is really a life sentence. I was defending myself. They took out their guns. Even if I killed them, it would be useless. Looking at the man, Jiang Hai chuckled and continued. But hearing Jiang Hai's words, the man laughed even more happily. Currently ranked 17th, 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 Little Fei begs for a recommendation. Fellow big shots, please do your best and give your recommendation to Little Fei. Tomorrow is the day I will be taken off the leaderboard. If I am on the leaderboard today, Little Fei will be adding more chapters. 12th will be adding 1 chapter, 11th will be adding 2 chapters, and 10th will be adding 3 chapters. Please everyone recommend me. First of all, today's guaranteed 2 chapters will be released first. Chapter 47. Gun? Who saw it? You're defending yourself. Do you think you're defending yourself just because you say so? You have to understand, foreigner, it's not you who has the final say here, it's me. If I say you're guilty, you're guilty. If I say you're not, you're not. The man slowly walked in front of Jiang Hai and tapped the table in front of Jiang Hai with his fingertips with a look of disdain. What do you mean by that? Looking at the man in front of him, Jiang Hai couldn't help but laugh. He leaned back and looked at the man in front of him indifferently. He wanted to hear what the man had to say. So you still don't understand? You Wuxia people say every day that you're the second smartest race in the world. Your IQ is really like that of monkeys. Yellow boy, since you don't understand, I'll make it clear. Do you understand? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the policeman said with a look of disdain. At the same time, he rubbed the index finger, middle finger, and thumb of his right hand together. Money? Seeing the other party's gesture, Jiang Hai didn't find it difficult to guess what the other party meant. At this time, he couldn't help but shake his head with a smile. It seems that you're quite proficient in this. You must have done this many times. Holding his chin, Jiang Hai looked at the man in front of him and said word by word. He wanted to see if all the crows in the world were equally black. Isn't this a rare occurrence? I advise you to put away your other thoughts. Our police department, whether it's Winthrop's, Boston's, or even the entire Massachusetts police system, is the same. If it's me who handles this matter, it may cost less. If the chief or deputy chief is alarmed, it'll probably cost several times more. Looking at Jiang Hai, the man narrowed his eyes and said. Whether what he said was true or not, Jiang Hai didn't care. Even if it was false, he would take it as true. Come on, name a price. Hearing the man's words, Jiang Hai looked at him and said slowly. All right, that's a deal. $50,000 and I'll guarantee your safety. Seeing Jiang Hai fall into the trap so easily, the man here couldn't help but say happily. His enlarged pupils showed that he was really excited. 50,000? Haha, are all the people from Winthrop so greedy? And look at the video behind you, it's still on. Hearing this man's words, Jiang Hai smiled disdainfully, then said to him with an unhappy face. That's our procedure to prevent me from hitting you. But if I really wanted to hit you, I wouldn't do it here. But don't worry, if I say it's there, it's there. If I say it's not there, it's not there. I'm here to represent the law and the entire police department. I advise you to stop dreaming. Just tell me, will you give me the $50,000? Seeing Jiang Hai's eyes looking at the camera over there, the man couldn't help but sneer and said with an indifferent face. I'll give you what? I'll give your grandmother a short answer. I don't think we have anything else to talk about. Let's wait for my lawyer to come. Hearing the man's words, Jiang Hai sneered and said indifferently. Your lawyer? You have a lawyer? If we don't hire a lawyer for you, you don't have a damn lawyer. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the man here snorted coldly. He clearly didn't think that Jiang Hai was a rich man. A rich man can hire a lawyer. You know, in the United States, lawyers earn a lot. Where did the money come from? Of course, it came from the people who hired them for lawsuits. And in his opinion, Jiang Hai's dressing was similar to a small boss who had waited for many years and finally got the opportunity to open a restaurant in the United States. After all, Jiang Hai's whole body from head to toe except for sportswear was some outdoor equipment. These things are very expensive in China, but in the United States, it's really not expensive. For example, Nike or Adidas. In some schools in China, only the richest children can afford to wear these, but in the United States, these are the clothes that the poorest black people like to wear. Ordinary white people, if not playing basketball or watching a game, would never wear these clothes. So in this man's opinion, Jiang Hai can't be a rich man. A person like him doesn't have a damn lawyer. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai didn't continue, but just smiled, because his super hearing had already heard some sounds. Sure enough, at this moment, footsteps came in from outside. "Mr. Adams, this way please. Your client will be locked up here for the time being." With the voice of the policewoman who just left, the door of the interrogation room was opened. The policewoman respectfully led a middle-aged man in his 40s in. This middle-aged man looked very energetic, wearing a pair of gold-rimmed glasses. His face was also very stiff, there was no smile at all. He was wearing a well-ironed suit. As soon as he came in, his eagle-like eyes began to scan the room. When he saw Jiang Hai sitting there, he quickly walked over. "Hello, Mr. Jiang Hai, I'm sorry to let you suffer here. My name is Moses Adams, I'm your lawyer." Looking at Jiang Hai, the lawyer here said with a serious face. At the same time, he shook hands with Jiang Hai, who was handcuffed. As for this lawyer, it was actually the first time Jiang Hai met him. He found this person through the service of his Centurion credit card. When he was in the police car, he was allowed to use his mobile phone. So, while he was in the police car, he called the number he knew a long time ago but never called. For Jiang Hai, a VIP user of Samsung, this was the first time he saw him. After confirming his identity and location, there was no need for him to go through all the trouble. As for this lawyer, needless to say, he knew that the existence of a lawyer with the Samsung Centurion credit card would not be bad. In fact, this was just that Jiang Hai didn't know. This lawyer was more than good. He was very good. This lawyer was from Shida Law Firm, the fourth largest law firm in the world. This law firm mainly engaged in international arbitration, international law and policy, international trade, and anti-monopoly. Generally, civil disputes like this would not be paid too much attention, but as the saying went, this was a paradise for the rich. For a rich person like Jiang Hai, no matter how small a civil dispute was, it was still a big deal. "I don't understand why you're interrogating my client here. I've seen the surveillance video on the street. My client is clearly the victim, but you handcuffed him and locked him up in the interrogation room. I think that you've committed a serious breach of duty. I advise you to sue you." After shaking hands with Jiang Hai, the man turned around and looked at the two people in front of him, speaking loudly. Hearing this man's words, the woman's expression was still okay. After all, it was just a dereliction of duty. Moreover, she hadn't watched the video on the street, so she naturally didn't know much. However, the man's face showed embarrassment and fear. "If they don't lock me up, how can they ask me for a bribe?" Seeing the expression on the man's face, Jiang Hai chuckled. His character was like this. He was not a saint. He never gave others a chance to repent. He remembered clearly the scene when this guy arrogantly asked for money. Now, how could he let go of such an opportunity? What? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the woman couldn't help but be stunned, and then subconsciously looked at the man. "No, there is no such thing at all. Sir, is your brain muddled? How is this possible?" Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the man immediately shouted, and at the same time he quietly walked towards the camera in the distance. "No, let him destroy the camera. Our conversation is there." Seeing this guy's movements, Jiang Hai knew what he wanted to do and said immediately. After hearing Jiang Hai's words, the man turned around in an instant and wanted to grab the camera, but Jiang Hai was faster. He stood up directly and kicked the man to the ground. At the same time, the lawyer on the other side moved rather quickly. He walked in front of the camera in a few steps and grabbed the camera. When he replayed the video, he couldn't help but be stunned, because the words recorded on the camera were very clear. "No, I'm just joking. Yes, I'm really just joking." The man who rolled on the ground stood up and said nervously to Jiang Hai, the lawyer, and his companion, "Sir, we will investigate this matter. If this is the truth, we will punish him," Wang Yao said. Hearing the man's words, the woman next to him hesitated for a moment, but still said to the lawyer and Jiang Hai, "Obviously, she wants the camera that is already in the hands of the lawyer. This is an incredible evidence. Speaking of which, this matter was originally a misunderstanding. If it really escalates, then it will be troublesome. This can't be." This guy said that their police system does this, even the plaintiff is blackmailed. This shows the nature of the matter. He said that their director, deputy director, and all their colleagues will accept such money, and those police stations in Boston are the same, even Massachusetts is the same. He said it himself, this is a big deal. Hearing the woman's words, the lawyer next to her couldn't help but look at Jiang Hai. In fact, this matter mainly depends on Jiang Hai's attitude. After all, he is the party involved. This matter can be said to be big or small, but as far as the current situation is concerned, Jiang Hai doesn't seem to be ready to be kind. Since he is not ready to be kind, then his responsibility as a lawyer will be reflected. Since this is the case, I still don't know how many accomplices he has, so this police lady, I will not give this to you because no one knows if it really implicates your director, deputy director, or even the people in Boston Police Station, and the judicial personnel in Massachusetts. I will appeal to the federal government. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the lawyer here took the camera back, then straightened his clothes and said with a serious face. Chapter 48. Boss, are you okay? As soon as he walked out of the interrogation room, Robbins and others who were in the police station stood up immediately and looked at Jiang Hai nervously. Although Winthrop is not small, it is not big either. It didn't take long for such a big incident to spread in the town. Robbins and others, when they heard the news, had already driven to the police station. Looking at the nervous faces of these people in front of him, Jiang Hai chuckled. Whether it is because they are afraid or he is frightened, they will not develop here in the future, so they will lose their jobs. Perhaps they were just worried about him, but at the very least, their hearts were sincere. Looking at Robbins, Burke, Philemon, Harriman, Bell and Ai Dehua in front of him, Jiang Hai took a deep breath. It's nothing, it's all superficial injuries. Nodding to the few people, Jiang Hai said faintly. I think, boss, you still need to apply for a carry gun license. Otherwise, it is too difficult to guarantee your safety. Hearing that Jiang Hai is fine, Robbins thought for a moment and said with a headache. Well, let's talk about this later. To be honest, Jiang Hai also wants to apply for a gun license, but this license requires the cooperation of the local police station. Jiang Hai's current relationship with the police station is obviously not suitable for this license. Mr. Jiang Hai, what should we do about this incident? Seeing that Jiang Hai and his men finished talking, the lawyer behind Jiang Hai came over and asked Jiang Hai with a serious face. What should be done? Jiang Hai has to speak. I was almost killed. Naturally, this matter can't be settled. Those who hit me, what is the highest crime that can be assigned to them? The general Chinese have the mentality of turning big things into small things and small things into nothing, but Jiang Hai doesn't. He is a person who will seek revenge for the smallest grievance. Whoever bit him, he would kill. Even if he had the upper hand in this conflict, it was useless. Those people have already used their guns, and according to the images taken by the roadside cameras, extortion, kidnapping, and intentional assault can't escape. We can also add on the charge of murder. After thinking for a while, the lawyer here said faintly. In the United States, just like in Wuxia, the Sky Eye system was installed. The so-called Sky Eye system was to monitor every position, leaving almost no blind spots. For example, there were cameras on some electric poles, intersections, trees and so on. Except for some slums, almost every corner of the United States had cameras. Of course, some private places did not have cameras. For a lawyer like Moses Adams, it was very easy for him to get information from the cameras. Then let's do it. What about the police station? Jiang Hai said without thinking. The police station is much simpler. Asking for bribes, threatening the plaintiff and testimonies of receiving money. With these, it's enough to make these people unable to make a comeback. At least that guy has to go to jail for a few years. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the lawyer here also said with a smile. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai curled his lips. Why threaten me for so long? Just a few days in jail? It's too light. Just do as you say. I only want results, the best results, do you understand? Money is not a problem. If I don't vent my anger, I won't be able to survive in the United States. Looking at Moses Adams in front of him, Jiang Hai said word by word. That's natural. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Moses Adams on the other side also said with a smile. Since money is not a problem, then everything is not a problem. Hearing Jiang Hai's conversation, the faces of the policemen next to him were also ugly. They knew that this time they were really in trouble. But Jiang Hai didn't care about this. Surrounded by his men, they walked out of the police station together. But just as they walked out, a group of people anxiously surrounded them. When he saw the figures all over the ground, Jiang Hai was shocked. He thought that he would be surrounded as soon as he left the police station, but when he took a closer look, he found that most of the people coming over were women, and some men were in their 50s or 60s. Obviously, they did not pose much of a threat to him. Sir, please be merciful and let my son go. Sir, they are still young. Please forgive them. As for the compensation, let's talk about it in private. Sir. Sir. Sure enough, these people didn't do anything to Jiang Hai but surrounded Jiang Hai. Some women cried to Jiang Hai for the first time. Hearing their words, Jiang Hai's face was cold. Needless to say, these people should be the families of those guys. But Jiang Hai is not a good person. He doesn't have a good impression of these parents. This is their own decision and my decision will not be changed. Get out of the way. Speaking to the crowd in front of him, Jiang Hai directly separated the crowd. Under the protection of his cowboys, he came to the parking lot outside the police station. At this time the cowboys drove out the 3 cars in the manor. Jiang Hai didn't say much and went straight into the F-650. Sir, I didn't discipline my brother well. How much do you want for the loss? We will compensate, but please don't. Seeing Jiang Hai get into the car, a man in a cowboy suit hurried over and said eagerly. Jiang Hai also knew this person. It was the young man in the pub that day. Robin's comment was good. He seemed to be called Augustine Wilson, the brother of Faraday Wilson. He's already an adult. He has to be responsible for what he did. Since you didn't discipline him well in the beginning, don't come to me now. That's it. Looking at the anxious young man in front of him, Jiang Hai lowered the window and said coldly. Then he motioned to Robbins in front of him. Robbins started the engine and left with everyone. Looking at the fading taillights, the people here couldn't help but be speechless. They thought that Jiang Hai's attitude would be tough, but they didn't expect it to be so tough. For a while, some women couldn't help but start crying. Hearing these women's cries, the men next to them also sighed helplessly. This matter is difficult to handle. Boss, your dinner is dead. Do you still want to eat that thing tonight? Jiang Hai, Robbins and Philemon sat in one car. The other 2 cars were driven by Burke Dollar and Edward Anderson. Harriman and Bell sat in the front passenger seat of the 2 cars respectively. Jiang Hai didn't know the atmosphere in the other 2 cars, but in this car the atmosphere was not very good. There was not even a sound, so after about 5 minutes, Philemon spoke first. In fact, it was understandable. After all, Robbins and the others were from this town. Those who came to rob Jiang Hai, even if they were not familiar with them, they had watched them grow up. Now their position was the most awkward. Jiang Hai needed to establish his authority. He needed to let everyone in this town know that he was not to be trifled with. So this time he would not go easy on them. However, they were very close to the people in this town. It was really not easy to be caught in the middle. But for the sake of this job, they still decided to ignore this matter. The people from the United States were very passionate, but they were also very clear-headed. They didn't have the friendship of the 7th aunt or the 8th aunt. Although the situation was a little awkward, their relationship wasn't to the extent that they would risk their jobs to plead for mercy for those people. Hence, after thinking for a while, Philip spoke first. Sigh, it's dead. Such a big carp, what a waste. Hearing what Philemon said, Jiang Hai couldn't help but sigh. It seemed that his idea of cooking fish tonight was shattered. That kind of fish can be found in our river. There are even bigger ones than this one. Usually those half-grown boys don't go fishing, they go shooting fish. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Luo Binsi stiffly changed the topic. Shooting fish. Hearing what Robin said, Jiang Hai was stunned for a moment. Shooting fish is not difficult to understand. It's probably shooting fish with a bow or crossbow. He has seen it before on the internet, but he really hasn't played it. If the boss wants to play, there is an outdoor goods store in the town. There are bows and arrows there. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Robbins also smiled and said to Jiang Hai, this is possible. Forget it, anyway it's so late today. Probably everyone hasn't eaten yet. Let's have a bite in the town. Hearing Robin's words, Jiang Hai nodded and said with a light smile. Okay, then I'll ask Vic to drive over. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Philemon also laughed, and then called his wife who was still at home. At the same time, Robbins also used the walkie-talkie to talk to the people in the other 2 cars. The 3 cars turned the steering wheel and headed in the other direction of the town. The United States was a typical country of immigrants. This country had no traditions, no cultural traditions, and no history. Even the food they ate did not have any unique characteristics. When it comes to the representative cuisine of the United States, it is estimated that 90% of people will think of 2 words, fast food. Yes, the largest proportion of the food industry in the United States is fast food. In addition to fast food, other food here is food from other countries. For example, Chinese restaurants. Although it is very bad, at least it looks like Chinese food. In addition to Chinese food, there is also Japanese food, teppanyaki, sushi, and Korean food, mainly barbecue. In addition, the most high-end food is French food, the most affordable food is German food because it is all meat, and the most popular food is Italian food. One must know that pizza, the aircraft carrier of fast food, came from Italy. Today, Jiang Hai and the others went to eat Italian cuisine but not pizza. After all, Italian cuisine, in addition to pizza, There were many other delicious dishes. Jiang Hai and the others also went to eat pizza. I still need 1,000 points, 200 clicks, or 200 recommendations. Please help and support me. Chapter 49. Generally speaking, what is the first thing that comes to mind when Italian food is mentioned? Spaghetti, pizza, pizza, spaghetti? But in fact, in addition to these two, there are many other things in Italian cuisine. Italians can't just eat these two things. Jiang Hai has not been to real Italy, but there is a lot of food in Italian restaurants in Boston. This restaurant is called Italian cuisine. Jiang Hai has been here before, so he is still very familiar with the food here. First, 8 servings of cheddar soup, then a fried squid, fried squid, fried clams, 8 servings of crab meat, baked mushrooms, 2 Milan calf shins, 2 veal slices, and 8 servings of ham and cheese steaks. What's your staple food? Looking at the menu in front of him, Jiang Hai came up and ordered a lot of things. These things are all Italian or the signature dishes of this restaurant. The taste is really good. Let's order black spaghetti. Looking at each other, Robin spoke first. 8 black spaghetti. Hearing Robin's words, Jiang Hai also said to the waiter next to him. After the waiter heard the name of the dishes, he respectfully took the menu and left. Not long after, Philip's wife also arrived. Everyone gathered at a long table and began to chat, but it didn't take long for the dishes to be served. The first dish was the soup, cheddar soup. This kind of soup was filled with marks and could be refilled indefinitely. In almost all places in Boston, cheddar soup could be drunk. It was the same here. The soup was made with potatoes, some modern vegetables in season, and fresh clam meat. The ingredients were quite sufficient, and the white soup was almost dry when scooped up by a spoonful. The natural freshness and sweetness of deep-sea cold water seafood and the sweetness of vegetables are perfectly blended together here. It is not fishy, but the taste is really satisfying. Drinking a mouthful, it warms the stomach and whips the appetite. Next is the fried clams. This is a very simple fried clams. The fried clams, with dough, are eaten with the restaurant's self-made tartar sauce. It is sour and sweet. It is also an appetizer, but the taste is really good. Crab-baked mushrooms is a snack, but the plate is not small. It is almost the same size as the plate at home. There is baked cheese in it. The main ingredients are crab meat and mushrooms. The small mushrooms are stuffed with crab meat, which is quite affordable. Coupled with the milk, it is ridiculously fragrant. Fried squid is fried squid ring, but it is not called that here. It is just like in China, the small squid is also called parasol flower. The name is different, but the way to eat it is the same. The squid is very soft, the dough is very thin, squeezed with a little lemon juice, the sweet taste is completely unstoppable. It is indeed very delicious. Veal slices is a specialty in Italy. It is said that it is eaten in Milan, the hometown of the boss. The veal is boiled with celery, onion, bay leaf and other spices, plus white wine like vodka, not the white wine of Wuxia, until it is soft. Then it is sliced and cooled. Then it is drizzled with squid and fish paste and made into mayonnaise sauce. It is delicious with the taste of beef and the freshness of fish. Calf shank is made by cutting beef shank into a ring shape and stewing it with white wine, West red wine, and spices for a long time. The marrow inside the bones is the most delicious. Ham, cheese and steak. Well, it is just as it looks on the surface. It is made of ham, cheese and steak. There is nothing else but a lot of meat. This plate of meat alone is more than half a gene. Jiang Hai is also the most fond of this dish. In addition to these dishes, the main dish is the black spaghetti, which is also quite delicious. This kind of black spaghetti is somewhat like the buckwheat noodles of Wuxia. It is a little bitter, but it is very delicious. Compared to buckwheat noodles, this kind of black spaghetti requires more sauce. Most people in the US like to eat seafood sauce, ketchup, Mexican barbecue sauce, sweet and spicy sauce, etc. But Jiang Hai is a little tired of eating a table full of sweet and sour food. Although he likes to eat sweet and sour food in China, such as double-cooked pork, spicy braised pork strips, cherry pork, etc., he can't stand to eat such things overseas. So, what he wanted was a normal buttery vegetable sauce with some Mexican chili sauce. When it comes to chili, there are probably a lot of people in China who are unconvinced. For example, Shudi, Nanhai, Xiang Province and so on. These places are all places that eat spicy food very fiercely. But in fact, according to the spiciness, the spiciest yellow lantern in China is not ranked number 1. The first is the British chili, known as Naga's Viper, also known as spicy off your head. If you accidentally take a bite, you will be immediately sent to the hospital. Jiang Hai heard a story in the past. There is a Shu person who can eat spicy food. He specially went to the United Kingdom to challenge this kind of chili. After taking a bite, he was sent to the hospital for emergency treatment. The little red chili was wrinkled and looked terrible. The second is also from the United Kingdom. It is called Trinidad scorpion butch tea, also known as poisonous scorpion. The smoke from this kind of chili is boiled with a gas mask. If it is inhaled, it will also be sent to the hospital. The third kind of chili is the Indian soul-breaking pepper, also known as the devil pepper. This kind of chili is originally used to plant in the fields and the periphery of the village as fences. It is not used to prevent people but to prevent elephants. If elephants eat it, they will cry because of the spiciness, let alone people. The fourth kind is the Mexican ghost pepper. Its spiciness is 3 times that of the South China Sea yellow lantern and 20 times that of the Chaotian pepper. This kind of chili is not allowed to sell fresh chili because it is too spicy. Only dried chili and chili sauce are allowed to be sold. The sweet chili sauce that Jiang Hai is eating now has its ingredients. Although it is only a little, it is quite delicious and the spiciness is very good. Everyone is quite satisfied with the meal. After Jiang Hai paid the bill, everyone drove back to rest. It is also necessary to explain here that in a restaurant like this in the United States, you have to give a tip. The amount of tip is basically calculated according to the price of the meal. Under normal circumstances, it is 10% to 15% of the meal. This is based on the mood and the service attitude. 15% is very satisfied, 10% is average, and if you feel very satisfied you can give more. Naturally there is no limit. However, Jiang Hai is not a person who has nowhere to spend his money, so he basically gives a 15% tip and will not give more. Jiang Hai and the others spent more than $320 on this meal, so when they paid the bill he gave $370. In the United States, except for fast food restaurants like Kai Fung Flower and Mai Deli, which do not give tips, all other restaurants have to be given. Along the way, the 4 cars majestically returned to Jiang Hai's manor. After parking the cars, everyone went back to their own homes. Jiang Hai also returned to his villa. After taking a bath in his room, he went back to watch TV for a while before falling asleep. However, he fell asleep, but there are too many people who can't sleep tonight. As a lawyer recommended by American Express, Moses Adams is naturally very responsible. To be able to show off in front of a rich person like Jiang Hai and fight for a regular client is a very good thing for him. After all, for rich people there are many things that they need a lawyer for. For example, transfer of ownership, some labor disputes, some mergers and acquisitions, and so on. Even if it was an accounting company they could also do it. For a rich man like Jiang Hai, even if he did nothing all year round, as long as he was a regular lawyer, he could still earn tens of thousands of dollars. This is something that these lawyers can't give up. After all, the annual income of a middle-class family in the United States is only tens of thousands of dollars. Therefore, after leaving Winthrop, he did not return to Boston. Instead, he went directly to New York. There, he sued the Winthrop Police Department, the Boston Police Department, and the Massachusetts judicial system. Of course, Faraday and his group can't escape because he has a testimony and a video in his hand. The people in the United States are very reliable. After all, they have already intervened in the state government, and the FBI took action at that time. The former's lawsuit is actually all bark and no bite. After all, even if it is said in the video, the United States has always implemented the policy of raising honest people with high salaries. The income of these high-ranking officials in the United States is very high, and it is very transparent. It is easy to be targeted by others with a few extra dollars, let alone blatantly taking money from the plaintiff. This is simply impossible. In the United States, generally speaking, the police don't dare to take money because if they take money from you, they might report you after you have done your job. At that time, not only will you be fired, but you will also have to compensate the other party double the money. On the other hand, if the other party gave you money and you directly reported him, not only would you be fine, but the court would also have to give you a few times more money while you were in prison. Such a reward and punishment system, according to the words of the people, was too inhumane. Everything was linked to money. But it is precisely because of this that the corruption in the United States is controlled. They only take money from political donations and businessmen. For example, when a piece of land is about to be sold, they will sell the information in advance to those who have the ability to fight for it. They will not reveal the base price. They will only tell them that the land is about to be sold and give them more time to raise money. These high-ranking officials have a lot of money just for this kind of information. How can they extort money from the plaintiff? They are not interested in this kind of small amount of money. That's why they don't dare to accept these benefits. This is just that person using a tiger's skin to make a name for himself. With a little investigation, they will know that this matter has nothing to do with these people. That's why when these people received the news, they only felt that it is a little troublesome. But on the other side in Winthrop's police station, it was gloomy. This is because the police officer who committed the crime is in their police station. If they say that this matter has nothing to do with them, how can others believe them? There is a saying in Wuxia since ancient times. Subordinates follow the example of their superiors. Although there is no such saying in the United States, they understand the meaning of this sentence. Hey. It is on the front page at the last second. Haha, although it is estimated that the 12th chapter is the end, Xiao Fei still wants to thank everyone. After all, this book is on the front page. I will add a chapter today. Please support me. Chapter 50. If it wasn't for the higher-ups, an ordinary policeman like him wouldn't have dared to collect money from the plaintiff so blatantly. Taking a step back, since this wasn't the first time this person did this, even if the higher-ups didn't do the same thing, they probably knew about it. And if they knew and said that this person didn't pay any tribute, who would believe it? It didn't matter if other people believed it or not, the people from the judiciary wouldn't believe it anyway. The chief and deputy chief of the Winthrop Police Department were woken up almost the same night. After learning about this matter, they were about to go crazy, especially the chief of the police department. He was originally a detective in Boston, but because he was about to retire, he was promoted to chief of the police department. He didn't know the details of the situation here. He just wanted to retire peacefully and be done with it. But he didn't expect to cause such a big problem for him. This time, don't talk about retiring normally. It would be considered light if he was betrayed for a few years before he retired. At this point, he couldn't help but curse in the police department. As for the deputy chief, he knew a little about the situation. He had also received money from this person before. It could be said that he was this person's protective umbrella. But the problem was that this was the United States, not China. The other party was a rich person. As long as he had the intention to stab the higher-ups, this matter couldn't be settled peacefully. When he received the call, his face instantly turned purple. Now, he wasn't thinking about how to suppress this matter because he knew that it couldn't be suppressed. His only thought was to remove himself from this matter. And if he wanted to remove himself, the biggest difficulty was undoubtedly on Jiang Hai's side. So, he was also thinking about whether he should talk to Jiang Hai. But unfortunately, when he went to visit the next day, Jiang Hai was no longer at home. Don't get me wrong, he didn't go anywhere else. He went to buy a boat. With the progress of the manor, the general direction of the Jiang Hai manor had already been set. For now, it would mainly focus on raising cattle. However, the resources in the sea could not be given up. These days, Ai de Hua had braved the bone-chilling sea water and had gone to the sea to check it out. It was just offshore and at sea level. The resources in this fishery were still very good. At least within his line of sight, he saw a lot of fish. Groups of mackerels, cod, and herring were cruising back and forth in the middle and upper levels. There were even some bonito and other fish that migrated with the warm current. This surprised Ai de Hua. Generally speaking, at this time of the year, these fish would go to the temperate ocean near the equator to live, but now these guys were living here, which made him very puzzled. But other than these fish, he was not clear about the situation at the bottom of the sea. After all, he was not Jiang Hai, who could ignore the water pressure and breathe in the sea. He could dive as far as he wanted. He couldn't, so in order to judge the situation at the bottom, he had to get a boat. However, this was Jiang Hai's fishery. Naturally, it was Jiang Hai who bought the boat. So while there was nothing important today, Ai de Hua called Jiang Hai and went to Boston together. Although there was a shipyard in Winthrop, it was not a good thing to go there now. After all, Jiang Hai was now an unwelcome person in the eyes of some people in Winthrop. Secondly, there were basically some small boats here. If they wanted to order a large boat, not only would the speed be slow but the quality would also be average. It would be better to go to Boston. Therefore, after some research, the two still drove to Boston. Boston was not a famous port city, but after all, it was a port and it was inevitable that there would be shipyards. The most famous shipyard here was the Charleston Naval Shipyard, but this shipyard had long been closed. Now it was a ship museum, but there were many shipyards near this shipyard. This time, Jiang Hai and Ai de Hua's goal was to visit these shipyards. Driving not long after, the two entered the port area of Boston. Far away, Jiang Hai saw a huge destroyer parked on the sea level. That was the Charleston Naval Shipyard. It was now one of the museums on the surface. It was a very old destroyer. This ship was open to the public for free. It was a place to cultivate the patriotic sentiments of the children of the United States. However, although Jiang Hai was also very interested in this place, it did not mean that he wanted to see it now. He would go and see it when the ship was loaded. Then he followed Ai Dehua to a shipyard called Ocean Temple. According to Ai Dehua's introduction, this shipyard was also an old and well-known shipyard in the Boston area. It was said that this shipyard was born in World War I. It specialized in receiving orders for ships sold to Europe by the government. During World War II, this shipyard was also quite good. It played an indelible role in supporting the European battlefield. Now, although they had entered an era of peace, the various military industries in the United States were basically closed. Except for some very large weapons companies, even the shipyards of the government had been closed, let alone them. Now they could only pick up the fishing boats to sell their resources. But as for the boats, they were not cheap. Although it was not to the extent that they would not open for business for 3 years, they would still be able to survive for 3 to 5 months. So, the shipyard's business was not bad. When Jiang Hai and Ai Dehua parked their car in front of the door, they saw that on the other side of the dock, there was a big ship that had just been completed. Looking at the big ship that was shining with a silver light, Jiang Hai couldn't help but sigh. It seems that in the near future he will also have such a big fishing boat. While he was looking at it with envy, a group of people came out of the shipyard. The leader was a white man who looked to be about 60 years old. He was about 1.9 meters tall with a lot of fat on his face, a gray beard and a huge beer belly, but his body was still very strong. He was wearing a yellow safety helmet. When he saw Ai Dehua, he was obviously stunned for a moment, then he walked over with a smile on his face. "Hey old man, why did you think of coming here?" Looking at Ai Dehua in front of him, he bumped fists with Ai Dehua and asked with a smile on his face. Hearing his words, Ai Dehua also spoke. "This is Dalton Green, the owner of this sea temple and my good friend. Dalton, this is my boss. He bought the Green Forest and wants to develop the fishing ground there, so we came here to buy some ships first." "Oh, the Green Forest, I know it. More than 10 years ago I sold ships to them, but it didn't take long for the poor guy to collapse under the subprime mortgage crisis. But it's really a big place. I didn't expect to see someone buy it in my lifetime. Young man, your courage is really good." When he heard Jiang Hai's words, the uncle was surprised. He knew the market value of that place. His shipyard was estimated to not even be a fraction of that big manor. He didn't expect this young man to be so rich. You're welcome," Jiang Hai said with a chuckle after shaking hands with the uncle. "Then let's go now, I'll accompany you to see what you need." Patting Jiang Hai on the shoulder, Dalton Green said with a smile, then led Jiang Hai and Ai Dehua into the huge shipyard behind him. As soon as they walked into the shipyard, a strong smell of engine oil floated into Jiang Hai's nose. If an average person smelled this smell, they would probably feel uncomfortable for a long time, but Jiang Hai and Ai Dehua were fine. Ai Dehua was used to running ships. The smell of engine oil was the same as the smell of the grass in front of his door. There was nothing wrong with it. As for Jiang Hai, he just came out of China. He was not afraid of the air in China, so why would he be afraid of this? He was thinking too much. "Our company originally specialized in manufacturing warships, but now we are only qualified to manufacture fishing boats. But you can rest assured that our fishing boats are also as strong as warships. Can be said that they are equipped with cannons." "Ah, I'm just kidding. What kind of ships do you need?" Dalton said jokingly while taking Jiang Hai to see more than a dozen busy workshops nearby. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai also looked at the ships here, but he didn't know what he wanted. "We need to order 4 ships, 3 dinghies and an offshore trawler." Seeing Jiang Hai's gaze, Ai Dehua said directly. "Fishing boats and dinghies have their own characteristics. Take fishing boats for example. Fishing boats are divided into ocean fishing boats and freshwater fishing boats. Ocean fishing boats are divided into coastal, offshore and ocean fishing boats. Their materials are also different: wood, steel, glass reinforced plastic, aluminum alloy and so on. There are also mobile propulsion methods, sails, manual, each can be said to be different. What Jiang Hai needed now was an inshore fishing boat. For an ordinary small boat, it was an out-and-out big guy. When Dalton Green heard that Jiang Hai wanted to go near the fishing boats, he gently nodded. Then he led them to a room next to him. There were a lot of documents in the room, which recorded the situation of all fishing boats. Jiang Hai needs to choose the model here. Of course, if there is anything that needs to be modified, it must be explained in advance. This one is fine. After about half an hour, Ai Dehua and Jiang Hai discussed it. In fact, Jiang Hai just listened. What Ai Dehua is showing now is mainly an attitude of obedience to Jiang Hai. As for what to choose, Jiang Hai doesn't know, but in his opinion the fishing boat that Ai Dehua chose is really good. "Oh, it's that one. This boat is not bad. The standard hull material is made of steel wire mesh cement. The whole length is 55 meters. It's a big guy among offshore fishing boats. It's equipped with 3 engines. Seeing Jiang Hai and AI Dehua's choices, Dalton couldn't help but start talking, but except for what he said at the beginning, Jiang Hai can't understand it at all. Today's third update is for everyone. Tomorrow will be removed from the list. This time the time on the list is too short. I hope the results will be better after I remove the list. Chapter 51. Stop, I believe you, just tell me the price. Waving his hand, Jiang Hai stopped the man from continuing to speak. Jiang Hai looked at him and said a few words. Jiang Hai didn't understand what he was saying, so it was better to directly state the price. With AI Dehua's relationship, it's unlikely that he would cheat him, so it's fine. The material of this ship is different, so the price is naturally different. I can give you all the engines you can carry. In the best case, steel mesh cement is the cheapest. The whole ship only costs about $400,000. If it's aluminum alloy, it's about $600,000. If it's super-tempered glass, it's about $1,200,000. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Dalton said with a smile. What do we need fiberglass for? With that money we can buy 2 aluminum alloy ones. AI Dehua said angrily when he heard Dalton's words. An old man like him hated these flashy things the most. How can it be useless? This thing is beautiful, and if you order such a ship, I can make the bottom and the middle layer translucent. This is our new technology. Lying in the cabin, you can see the situation in the sea, but you can see from the inside, but you can't see from the outside. This thing's protective power is stronger than aluminum alloy, and it's extremely corrosion resistant. Such a ship can be directly transformed into a luxury yacht, and it's much bigger than the average yacht, and the price is much cheaper. Looking at Jiang Hai, Dalton chuckled and said to Jiang Hai. He knew that although Jiang Hai has always listened to AI Dehua, Jiang Hai is the one paying for it. As long as Jiang Hai is satisfied, then it's easy to talk about it. Sure enough, as soon as he heard the word yacht, Jiang Hai's heart moved. Although he was still an otaku in his bones, he was also very interested in those rich people. He had inquired about it before. Nowadays, rich people don't play with cars but with airplanes and yachts. However, he had inquired before. In China, a small broken yacht could be sold for a few million. Of course, this was talking about a real yacht and not those small broken open boats. In the United States, a luxurious yacht could be sold for more than $1 million. A better yacht could be sold for $1.6 million or even $2 million. But for the rich, it was just a toy. Although Jiang Hai's assets are shrinking rapidly, to be honest, he also has some ideas about yachts. But it's a bit of a loss to buy one, but if this fishing boat can be transformed into a yacht, it's not bad. Seeing the light in Jiang Hai's eyes, AI Dehua shook his head and chuckled. After all, Jiang Hai is still too young. If it's him, then he will buy an aluminum alloy fishing boat. Compared to the steel mesh and cement fishing boat, this kind of fishing boat is very good. It's not as heavy as the steel mesh and cement fishing boat, it can't run fast, and it's easy to overturn. The aluminum alloy fishing boat is enough to meet the needs of all offshore fishing boats. Even most fishing boats in the sea are similar. Fiberglass, in his opinion, is really not necessary, but if Jiang Hai wants it, then he has to help Jiang Hai negotiate the price. Then we'll take the fiberglass one. Our boss is a boss, so he can't be without a toy. It'll be great if we can combine the two into one. But Dalton, let's make it clear that $2 million is not a small amount. You'll have to cover everything in it, including the 3 engines, the underwater sonar detector, all the inner rooms, showers, rooms, and so on. You'll be responsible for everything. Also, you can decide the price of the boat we're going to install later. Looking at Dalton in front of him, AI Dehua said with a gloomy face. Hearing AI Dehua's words, Dalton laughed. Sonar, satellite, computer, engine, they are all equipped with the best. This boat can hold 3 rooms and a living room. We will replace all of them with genuine leather. Bed, sofa, all of them are the best. In addition, we will give you a central air conditioner. Water, electricity, and wiring are all installed. Later, if you want to install a small boat, I will charge you for one of the 3 boats. Is that okay? Hearing Dalton's words, AI Dehua calculated for a moment. According to Dalton, the price of these things added together is estimated to be $200,000, which is equivalent to giving himself a big discount. Then he nodded to Jiang Hai, and Jiang Hai, who had been a little tempted, was relieved after seeing AI Dehua nod. Then the matter was much simpler. Jiang Hai directly went to pay the money and was done. $2 million wasn't a small amount, but it wasn't too much for Jiang Hai. It was still within his acceptable range. The big boat was scheduled to be delivered in a month. A boat like this needed to be custom-made, but the small boat could be installed now. In fact, Ai Dehua himself also knew how to install a small boat. He had one in his home, but Jiang Hai didn't let him install it himself because it was too ugly. It looked like a landing craft which was really ugly. Although he was also the main installer in the shipyard now, with the help of these machines, it was much easier. In fact, a small boat could also be called a small yacht. Yachts were classified according to their length. Those under 6 meters were considered mini, those between 6 and 11 meters were considered small, those between 12 and 20 meters were considered medium, and those above 20 meters were considered large. Jiang Hai's fishing boat was large, but it was a fishing boat after all, not a real yacht, so the price was not too high. The small boat he was going to make now was a real yacht, but the cheapest one. Jiang Hai was now assembling 3 small boats, 2 open boats and 1 deck boat. The open boat was a small motorcycle, and could seat 4 to 8 people according to the size. Since Dalton had said that he would only charge Jiang Hai for 1 boat, Ai Dehua threw his original idea of installing a 6-person boat to the back of his mind, and decided to install an 8-person boat. In any case, he didn't have to worry about not being able to pull it. After all, Jiang Hai's F-750 wasn't just good-looking. This kind of open boat was quite good for fishing and patrolling. The only pity was that it didn't have a bottom cabin, so it couldn't be used for living. But it was still possible to lie down and rest, and the space was a little small. But if it was only used for patrolling or fishing occasionally, it would be very good. Ai Dehua had been explaining to Jiang Hai that this boat didn't have a main cabin, and the open groove under the deck could be used to store fish and so on. But he didn't understand. Anyway, Ai Dehua was an expert, so he just listened to him. Finally, he chose a very good-looking streamlined shape, and Jiang Hai completely handed over the assembly to Ai Dehua. After all, the installation of a small boat was really troublesome. Not only did the body, the engine, the propellers and other hardware, but also the software, the radio, the bridge, the control system, the suspension system, the navigation system and so on. It was a headache just looking at it. Compared to the open boat, the deck boat wasn't much better. This kind of boat was named because it ran through a horizontal deck. There were handrails or the upper edge of the boat around the boat. Everything was built on the boat. Whether it was used for sunbathing or fishing, it was very good. Could even be used for some activities at night. This boat was the same as the open boat. It was a small boat between 15 to 20 feet long, and could seat 1 to 8 people. But compared to the open boat, this kind of boat was more stable. Although it was slower, it was a good choice to entertain guests and go fishing. But no matter how good the choice was, it had nothing to do with Jiang Hai. He didn't understand these things, so after giving everything to Ai Dehua, he slipped away and prepared to stroll around nearby. Assembling these things would take a total of half a day, so he could take a good look around here. And Ai Dehua didn't hold back with Dalton. The materials of these boats were all made of fiberglass. Since he used the big boat, he wouldn't hold back with the small boat. When the time comes, he would paint it silver and it would look good. After seeing Ai Dehua start to get busy, Jiang Hai also walked out of the shipyard. He wanted to walk around here. But to be honest, he really didn't know what was so fun about Boston. Although for the people of the United States, Boston could be said to be one step at a time. Because this was the most historic city in the United States. But to be honest, Jiang Hai wasn't very interested in these things. But fortunately, there was a place nearby that Jiang Hai was quite interested in, the Charleston shipyard. Tightening his jacket, Jiang Hai walked towards the huge destroyer that he saw at a glance. It was now November. According to Boston's latitude, it was already the rhythm of the winter festival. Indeed, the weather had started to get colder. But it was different from Bing City. The coldness here was more subtle. Now in Bing City, it was estimated to be around -10 degrees Celsius during the day. But in this city, the coldest month of January, the coldest night was only -5 or -6 degrees Celsius, and it was only for a few days. Although the sea monsoon was very strong, it didn't feel that cold. As for Jiang Hai, he was already used to the temperature in Bing City. It was a piece of cake for him to come here. In the early winter, there were not many tourists at the Boston Naval Shipyard. This shipyard had long lost its function as a naval shipyard. Although the U.S. military had built a large number of ships here to participate in World War II, Korea War, Vietnam War, etc. But time was like a butcher's knife. Unknowingly, this shipyard had become a dead port, and the military had given up on this place. Moving his feet, Jiang Hai arrived in front of the destroyer named Carson Young. The tour here is free. Therefore, Jiang Hai didn't have to think too much about it. He just walked into the huge ship. Chapter 52. Wow, this is the inside of a destroyer. Walking into the destroyer named Carson Young, Jiang Hai began to look around. The first place he came to was the marine room. From the outside, this ship wasn't small at all, but after walking in he found that this ship was really pitifully small. After all, it was a battleship for long-distance combat. The space inside was really not big. Even if it was an aircraft carrier, the rooms inside the hull were pitifully small. After all, in this limited space, they needed to be equipped with more ammunition and fuel. Otherwise, if they suddenly encountered an enemy halfway or ran out of fuel, they would be the ones to suffer. It was precisely because of this that the place where people lived was very small. For example, the marine room that Jiang Hai saw was like this. It was a small room about 5 square meters. The most important thing was that even the house was very short. Jiang Hai's height could only be regarded as the most ordinary person in the country, a third-class disabled person. He was originally 1.86 meters tall, but since the Dragon Ball's possession, his height had grown a little, but he was still less than 1.9 meters. With this height, he could only be regarded as an ordinary person in the United States, but even so, he had to lower his head when he entered this room. It was really too short. But in such a small place for people were living. 2 bunk iron beds were welded on both sides of the room. In the middle of the room, there was an iron cabinet divided into 4 parts. It seemed to be used for sundries. Other than that, there was nothing here. It could be seen that the life of a marine was very hard. After coming out of the marine room, Jiang Hai wandered around, but to be honest, he didn't understand where he was. He also didn't understand the photos hanging in the corridor of the ship. But fortunately, this place was to cultivate the patriotism of the children in the United States, so he didn't walk far before some children appeared in front of Jiang Hai. It seemed that they should be students of a certain elementary school in Boston who came here with their teacher to visit. The person explaining in front should be their teacher, but what surprised Jiang Hai was that this teacher was really beautiful. She looked like 25 or 26 years old. She was a woman with some Latin feeling. She wasn't as white as a Caucasian, nor was she black or yellow. She had brown hair that was more exquisite and closer to the aesthetic of the Orientals. And her wheat-colored skin gave people a feeling of health and sexiness. At this time, she was wearing a teacher's uniform, which made Jiang Hai think of a legendary romantic action idol drama. Of course, it was just a sudden flash. It could be seen that this teacher should be a decent person. The ship we are on now is called the Carson Young. It is a destroyer. Does anyone know the difference between destroyers, frigates, cruisers, and other ships? Withdrawing his thoughts, Jiang Hai slowly walked behind these children, and the teacher's voice came from his ears. As soon as her voice fell, many students began to raise their hands. Jiang Hai couldn't help but listen. In fact, he didn't know the difference between these things. I know it's the size. Finally, the teacher pointed to a black child to answer this question. The black child immediately said happily. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai frowned. Is that simple? In fact, it's that simple. That's right, but it's also not right. The distinction between warships is mainly based on size and scale. The warships we talk about are basically surface warships like submarines. We usually don't call them warships. Surface warships are aircraft carriers, battleships, cruisers, battlecruisers, destroyers, frigates, torpedo boats, missile boats, submarine hunters, submarine rescue ships, mine layer ships, anti-mine ships, amphibious landing ships, and so on. The main difference between them is their size and the second is their role. With the female teacher's explanation, Jiang Hai couldn't help but wipe his sweat. It seems that he didn't know these things. For example, how can surface warships be divided into warships and boats? Those with a displacement of less than 600 tons are boats, and those with more than 600 tons are warships. The displacement of each warship is different, and its role and strength are also different. To be exact, except for the aircraft carrier, the other ships are basically the same. The only difference is that the weapons they are equipped with are different. Jiang Hai didn't know this before, but it's understandable when he thinks about it. In China, not to mention elementary school, even in university, there are no such foreign activities. The East and the West have completely different ideas. In China, although patriotism is cultivated from a young age, it's more about being familiar with history, knowing the direction of the world and how powerful our great ancestors were. We used to come from all over the world to cultivate the children's sense of historical honor. As for guns, cannons, ships, airplanes, and so on, a simple introduction is enough. Even if they are really interested, they will only choose these departments when they are in university to study and learn. In the West, education is mainly about cultivating interests. From a young age, you will be exposed to these weapons. You will know how these things work and how to use them. This kind of interest from a young age will broaden your mind. In addition, people in the United States can be exposed to guns and cannons at a very young age. There's no way to say which side is good and which side is bad. It can only be said that there is a big gap in knowledge between the two worlds. For example, this is the Battle of Pearl Harbor, this is the Battle of Okinawa, this is the Battle of Leyte. Since this warship was commissioned, it can be said to be a meritorious ship. So after it was decommissioned, the government didn't sell it or recycle it. Instead, they kept it as a free museum for the citizens to visit. It has been parked here since 1974. After introducing the basic knowledge of the ship, the female teacher began to introduce the history of the ship. Listening to the female teacher's introduction, Jiang Hai also followed the children from the bow to the stern. They looked at the cockpit, the cabin, and so on. Listening to the female teacher's explanation, Jiang Hai also had a preliminary understanding of the ship. However, this ship is not very big. With the speed of elementary school students, they finished looking around in about half an hour and came out directly. As for Jiang Hai, he also came out with the elementary school students in a daze. This made the female teacher, who has been guiding the students, frown. In fact, when they were on the ship, she noticed that Jiang Hai has been following them. When they were fast, this guy was also fast. When they were slow, this guy was also slow. If they were on the ship, this guy could be said to be going the same way. But now that he's following them off the ship, it's worth being vigilant. Sir, is there anything I can help you with? When Jiang Hai followed them for a while, the female teacher finally couldn't help but stand there. After comforting the elementary school students, she said to Jiang Hai, there's nothing, I'm going over there. Hearing the female teacher's words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but stare. In fact, this female teacher really blamed Jiang Hai wrongly. Jiang Hai originally didn't want to do anything. Although he wasn't a saint, he wasn't a bad person. Now that she suddenly asked, he didn't know what to say. He could only stiffly point at the Sea Temple shipyard in the distance. This was indeed the path he wanted to take. Are you sure? Seeing Jiang Hai point there, the female teacher frowned and asked with a calm face. I'm sure. Hearing the female teacher's words, Jiang Hai stiffly nodded. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the female teacher didn't say much. She just took the children and retreated to the side. Her meaning was very clear. She wanted to see Jiang Hai leave. Seeing the female teacher's vigilance, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smile bitterly. Do I look like a bad guy? However, Jiang Hai, who didn't have any ulterior motives, didn't say anything and just walked forward. Seeing Jiang Hai leave, the female teacher took the children to the other side. Teacher, does that uncle like you? He secretly followed us. After confirming that Jiang Hai had gone far, a little girl next to the female teacher asked curiously, how is that possible? That uncle was just on the way with us. After being asked, the female teacher couldn't help but feel a little embarrassed. She immediately said to the girl, but listening to this, it didn't satisfy the curiosity of these students. Teacher, what you did is actually wrong. My mother said that sometimes women need to give some signals to men. Teacher, you are so beautiful but you still don't have a boyfriend. You must be too careful. At this time, another black boy said with a smile. Hearing his words, the female teacher couldn't help but glare at him. How old are you? Do you know what signals are? The teacher tapped the head of the black boy and said with a smile. That man, he wants to pursue me? With the end of the teacher's laughter, the children also temporarily put this idea to the back of their minds. However, only the teacher turned her head and glanced at Jiang Hai, who was not far behind her, leaving quickly. But looking at his leaving pace, she shook her head self-deprecatingly. It seems that this man is really just on the way with me. But thinking about it, just now in the cabin, Jiang Hai followed them for half an hour. She felt that it was a bit impossible to say that this man was not interested in her. This guy couldn't have been listening to her all the time. It must be known that this was real elementary school knowledge. Well, foreigners would never know what the domestic elementary school classes were like. At this time, Jiang Hai had already returned to the Ocean Temple shipyard, but just as he returned, he left again. Today's second update was continuously delivered. Today's new book list was released, but at the last moment, it was on the list. This made little Faye very gratified. Although it was only the 12th place, it was still in the transition period. It was very painful. Please support little Faye more. Chidian Chinese website www.chidian.com welcomes the vast number of readers to read. The latest, fastest, and most popular serialized works are all at Chidian Originals. Chapter 53. Boss, you'd better go out for a walk first. It's too noisy here. Covering his ears, Ai Dehua said to Jiang Hai with an embarrassed face. Jiang Hai on the opposite side was even more embarrassed. Because he walked in a hurry just now, he didn't notice that he bumped into a man who was bringing something over and knocked the things everywhere. Although it wasn't anything important and didn't hurt anyone, Jiang Hai, who didn't know anything, was still a little troublesome here. It wasn't that Jiang Hai didn't trust Ai Dehua, but he didn't seem to have anywhere to go. But I don't know where to go. Scratching his head, Jiang Hai said helplessly to Ai Dehua. He just went out for more than 40 minutes, of which more than half an hour was spent with a group of kids, but after that, Jiang Hai really didn't know where to go. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Ai Dehua was also silent because he didn't know what to do nearby. He spent most of his time at home or in Winthrop's town, so he didn't know what was going on around here. Opposite this port is Little Italy. You also know that there are a lot of delicious food in Italy. After Italy, not far away there is the city center in Wuxia. There are a lot of food vendors there. According to your Chinese words, it seems to be called Food Street or something. Dalton Green, who was counting the materials, came over and said to Jiang Hai with a smile. Hearing Dalton say that there was a snack street nearby, Jiang Hai's throat couldn't help but swallow a mouthful of saliva. He glanced at his phone. Although it was only 10 o'clock in the morning and it wasn't time to eat yet, it was still good to take a look. In line with the principle of not being a layman commanding an expert, Jiang Hai smiled and left again. He couldn't help much here and that was the most important thing. What's more, compared to listening to the noise here, he was more used to eating delicious food. After leaving the shipyard, Jiang Hai followed Dalton Green's instructions and walked towards the opposite side of the port. Shortly after walking out of the port, he saw a somewhat special neighborhood. According to the directions of the passers-by, he knew that this was Little Italy. After walking into this neighborhood, Jiang Hai found that it was quite a small bourgeoisie. Although he had nothing to do with the petty bourgeoisie, he was a very pure northeasterner, so his character was extremely boorish. He had always believed in drinking big mouthfuls of wine, eating big pieces of meat and eating stingily. There was no market for him there. In the afternoon when the hall was full of sunshine, going to a coffee shop, ordering a cup of coffee, enjoying the sweet aftertaste and tapping on the computer in his hands had nothing to do with him. In fact, Jiang Hai didn't want to drink coffee from the bottom of his heart. However, this was a scenic spot in the neighborhood, so it didn't matter if he went in. As soon as he walked in, he felt that the decoration style of the nearby shops was not to his liking. He glanced at the menu inside. It was basically similar to the Italian restaurant in Winthrop, but the portions were smaller than Winthrop's, but the dishes were much more exquisite. As for the price, it wasn't much different and it wasn't expensive. After all, this was Boston, the center of the metropolitan area, not a rural place with a metropolitan area like Winthrop. As he walked and looked, he had to admit that the streets of Boston were indeed quite deceptive. Because Boston was the first city to be built, and later expanded, the city center was not expanded. Because of the developed water, the nearby area was considered the city center. According to the Chinese language, it was called the Second Ring Road. In addition, Jiang Hai's sense of direction was really bad, so as he walked he suddenly found that he seemed to be lost. Of course he could still find the way back, but if he wanted to go to Wuxia City, it would be a little troublesome. Forget it, I'll take a break, drink something and then ask others for directions. After walking around twice and finding that he really couldn't find the place, Jiang Hai shook his head and sighed. He happened to find a coffee shop in front of him, so he walked over. Although he didn't drink coffee, it wasn't all coffee in the coffee shop. It was now early winter in Boston, so although there were many chairs outside the coffee shop, most people still didn't want to sit outside. They were willing to squeeze in that small coffee shop. Jiang Hai glanced at the situation inside and wisely chose not to squeeze in. Instead he chose a place and sat down. "Sir, what can I do for you?" As soon as he sat down, a waiter saw Jiang Hai in the shop, trotted over and handed the menu to Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai looked at it. Anyway, he was going to Wuxia City to eat. So, he mainly drank water here and he didn't care about anything else. So after a glance, he turned his gaze to the juice. "Well, a cup of watermelon juice." Pointing to the watermelon juice on the menu, Jiang Hai said to the waiter. Sir, the watermelon juice is iced." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the waiter was stunned. He looked at Jiang Hai with some puzzlement. Drinking iced things in the winter, this guy's brain must be damaged. "I know it's iced. This is it. Hurry up." Clapping his hands, Jiang Hai smiled awkwardly. Like most northern men, he didn't like to drink hot things such as beer. Even if it was -20 or 30 degrees outside, he was willing to drink cold. "Okay. The customer was God, so the waiter chuckled and walked into the coffee shop. Not long after, he brought out a watermelon juice and placed it in front of Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai looked at the watermelon juice with ice in front of him and took a sip. He had to admit that it was really cold, that his head hurt a little. But this feeling was cool. Teacher, look, isn't that the guy who followed us just now? At this moment, in this small store, the sharp-eyed black child tugged at his teacher's sleeve with a pleasantly surprised look on his face as he excitedly said, "And? Where is he? Let me see. Hey, it's really that uncle. Didn't he enter the shipyard just now? Why is he here now?" Hearing the words of the little black child, a little white girl next to him said with a look of surprise. Hearing the children's words, the female teacher also turned around from the bar and saw Jiang Hai's figure. Watermelon juice? When she turned around, she happened to see the scene of Jiang Hai drinking watermelon juice until his head hurt. This made the female teacher stunned for a moment. Then she looked back at the watermelon juice in front of her. Her frown deepened. She was a little upset now, and now seeing Jiang Hai, she was even more uncomfortable. According to the original plan, she should have taken the children back to Winthrop by now instead of staying here. If it weren't for the damn driver who had something to do at the last minute and left her here, she wouldn't have to spend so much money to treat the children to food. Of course, she wasn't distressed about the money, but this matter made her very upset. But at this time she found Jiang Hai sitting there. It would be strange if she was in a good mood. "Louis, Susan, you guys are responsible for looking after the children. I'll go out and take a look." The temper of the American woman is very fiery. Looking at Jiang Hai sipping the watermelon juice outside, she was furious. After saying a few words to the little boy and the little girl who spoke just now, she directly pulled her windbreaker and walked out of the shop. "Sir, if you have something to say, you can say it directly. If you keep following me like this, then I will call the police." The teacher left the dessert shop. Jiang Hai also heard the sound, but he didn't pay attention to it because he really didn't know who came out. But this woman was very purposeful. She immediately walked to Jiang Hai's side and said to Jiang Hai, "Hello." Hearing the female teacher's words, Jiang Hai also shifted his gaze from the watermelon juice cup in front of him to the side. As a result, he saw the angry female teacher at a glance. Jiang Hai almost choked to death, and listening to what she just said, it seems that she has misunderstood him again. "I'm not good at all, sir. If you don't want to explain why you followed me and these children, I think you would rather explain it to the police." The pair of black eyes looked at Jiang Hai like this, and the female teacher said with a serious face, "I really didn't follow you. I can only say that this is." Hurriedly waving his hand, Jiang Hai said anxiously, "Fate? How can you say such old-fashioned words?" Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the female teacher couldn't help but interrupt him disdainfully. The female teacher has heard such words a lot. To be honest, this female teacher was indeed good-looking. The 3/4 Latin American blood in her body made her skin tight, and her pores were not as thick as traditional European and American people. And the 1/4 European and American blood made her much taller than Latin Americans. She was about 1.75 meters tall, with a head of black shoulder-length hair that was slightly curly, delicate facial features, tall figure, big in the right places, small in the right places, and small in the right places. It was indeed eye-catching. But Jiang Hai could swear to the heavens that he really didn't follow her. "It's not fate, it's a misunderstanding, okay? I didn't think that I would meet you twice. Originally I came here to buy a ship. My people are assembling the ship in the Ocean Temple shipyard. If you don't believe me, you can go and take a look. Then, I didn't understand these things, so I was prepared to walk around here. Originally, I did follow you on the destroyer, but I didn't have any malicious intentions. It was also my first time seeing a destroyer. You explained it well, so I wanted to listen. As a result, when I came out, I was misunderstood by you. This time, I was going to Wuxia City's food street to walk around, but I got lost after 2 laps. I wanted to drink something here and ask the waiter for directions, but you came out." Looking at the girl's obviously angry expression, Jiang Hai was even more embarrassed. He immediately waved his hand helplessly while explaining. Hearing Jiang Hai's explanation and his panicked expression, the girl's brows couldn't help but relax a little, but she was still somewhat skeptical. In today's update, although there was no more competition for the leaderboard, there was still a need to fight for the bookmark. If you feel that this book is still to your liking, please click bookmark. This is the greatest support for the author. Thank you, everyone. Chapter 54. "Hi, Sister Xanthi, why are you here?" Just when Jiang Hai and the girl were feeling awkward and at a loss, A surprised voice came from afar. Then they saw some young people walking over quickly. There were a total of 8 young people, men and women, wearing colorful winter clothes. Obviously, for the people in this place it was already very cold. Compared to what they were wearing, Jiang Hai was wearing a sweater inside and a jacket outside. But for Jiang Hai it was really not cold here. Hey, Delia, why are you out shopping? Shouldn't you be in school? Seeing these people in front of her, the female teacher named Xanthi was stunned for a moment. Then she asked curiously, "Today is the regular season of the Celtics. Our school's basketball team got a few tickets, so as the cheerleader I'm going to watch." Hearing Xanthi's words, the girl on the other side said with a smile. Hearing what she said, Xanthi could not help but roll her eyes. This little girl really likes to show off. Even if she wants to watch the game is at night. Why is she loitering on the street now? It is different from China. Generally speaking, if junior high school and high school students are good at studying, they will attract the most attention. Besides beautiful girls, girls with good grades are the most attractive. But in the United States it is completely different. Children who were good at their studies were ostracized from the start. In the United States, the children who were really popular were those who played well. For example, in high school, the boys who attracted the most attention were those who played music and were elites in various clubs. For example, the most popular football club. Although the basketball team didn't have a high ranking in the professional league in the United States, its reputation in the high school and university competitions was extremely high. It was ridiculously high. Hence, the members of the basketball team also had a high reputation. As for the girls, the most eye-catching one is not the scholarship winner, but the cheerleader. Among the girls in the school, this girl is like a queen. So this girl is obviously showing off. Hello. Hearing the girl's words, the boys behind the girl smiled and nodded to Xanthi in front of them. Especially the tall boy who has been standing behind the girl, his face was full of confidence and youthful smile. Hello. Unfortunately, this smile didn't seem to attract the attention of the girl called Xanthi. Sister Sandy, you haven't told me why you're here. What kind of situation was this? Did we disturb you? Looking at Sandy and Jiang Hai in front of her, the girl couldn't help saying with a smile. No, I think there may be some misunderstanding between me and this gentleman. Today, I brought the children from the town here to visit the Navy shipyard, and this gentleman followed us all the way. Shaking her head, Sandy pointed to Jiang Hai and said helplessly, "Oh, our big farmer has such a hobby?" Hearing Sandy's words, the girl's eyes couldn't help but light up. She looked at Jiang Hai with an excited face and said, her playful expression almost said, "I'm very curious." "No, I'm not. Do you know me?" Hearing what the girl said, Jiang Hai could only smile bitterly. But halfway through his sentence he suddenly realized something. How did this girl know that he owned a farm? Haha, you really don't know me? Rich people's memory is really bad. I'm Delia George. You bought a horse from my dad's horse farm and we sent it to you. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the girl here couldn't help but look at Jiang Hai contemptuously, and then explained. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai suddenly remembered. There seems to be such a person. When he and Robbins went to buy a horse, he saw a very beautiful girl loading a horse there. Robbins seemed to have said that she went to school in Boston. At first, the two were joking, but he really didn't have any memory of it. He didn't expect this girl to remember him. "Oh, it's you. At that time you were wearing denim. Now you're wearing casual clothes. I really didn't recognize you." With an awkward smile, Jiang Hai said with a little embarrassment. Sister Sandy, don't worry, this guy is also from the town. The local tyrant who bought the green forest is this guy. He shouldn't have any strange hobbies. If he really likes you, then you'll be rich." After despising Jiang Hai again, Delia turned to Sandy and said. Sandy couldn't help but feel a little embarrassed when she heard what Delia said. In fact, this Sandy is also a member of the town of Winthrop. She is a homeroom teacher at Winthrop Elementary School. She had recently heard that the town's largest green forest had been bought by a mysterious Easterner. However, that Easterner usually did not show his face in the town, so she did not know Jiang Hai. Now that it was Delia's words, she chuckled. Since they know each other, this guy should really misunderstand. If it's a misunderstanding, then I apologize to you. I still have children to take care of. I'll leave first. After nodding to Jiang Hai, Sandy said goodbye to Delia and returned to the coffee shop. The scene was really a little awkward. "Hey Mr. Rich Boss, I solved a problem for you. Shouldn't you thank me?" Seeing Sandy walk into the coffee shop, Jiang Hai also breathed a sigh of relief. After all, it's not a good thing to be labeled as a pervert. Seeing Jiang Hai breathe a sigh of relief, Delia didn't leave but continued to smile at Jiang Hai. Well, thank you, or I'll treat you to something to eat. Let's go to Wuxia City. Looking at these teenagers in front of him, Jiang Hai said with a smile. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Delia's eyes couldn't help but light up. A free meal was obviously very tempting for girls of this age. But just as she was about to agree, the basketball team member next to her couldn't help but pull her. Seeing this person's slightly guarded expression, the girl couldn't help but stick out her tongue. Obviously, it was a little awkward to add a fake uncle like Jiang Hai to a group of young people. So the girl thought for a while and decided to give up this meal for the time being. Then let's do it first. We still have things to do today. The Wuxia City you want to go to is from this street, go straight and turn left at the second intersection. You can actually take the subway, the red line and the orange line are there. Delia smiled at Jiang Hai and said. After giving Jiang Hai directions, she smiled and waved at Jiang Hai before leaving. Jiang Hai nodded and said, "Don't worry." Jiang Hai was also very happy after getting the guidance. He thanked her, then drank the watermelon juice, paid the bill and left in a hurry. Looking at the back of Jiang Hai leaving, Sandy, who was still in the shop, couldn't help but blush a little. It seems that this guy is really not following me. At this time, Jiang Hai had already put the embarrassment behind him. After coming out of the dessert shop, he followed Delia's instructions and quickly walked into the area of Boston's Wuxia City. Sure enough, it didn't take long for him to smell a fragrance. From a distance he saw a large number of Wuxia restaurants. These restaurants had Chinese and English signboards on them. On both sides of the road there were many stalls. The owners of these stalls were Asian, white and black. The fragrance came from these stalls, but it was different from the snack street Jiang Hai imagined. The snack street here was not like the snacks in China, such as skewers, roasted cold noodles, roasted gluten, fried stinky tofu, rolls and so on. The snacks here were mainly Western snacks such as hamburgers, hot dogs, donuts, roasted sausages, seafood and so on. Although the style was a little different, Jiang Hai still couldn't help but feel hungry. Ai Dehua just told him that he would take care of lunch by himself. Ai Dehua would just have a meal with the workers in the shipyard. Looking at the time, it was already around 11 o'clock. It was time to eat. He touched his wallet. There were more than $400 left in his wallet. It was enough for him to eat anything. He immediately walked toward the snack stall in front of him. He first went to a donut shop surrounded by a lot of people. Jiang Hai first ordered 2 donuts. As he walked, he saw another corn muffin being sold in front of him. Then he saw a bearded man who looked like he was selling chicken and mutton skewers next to the stall. Jiang Hai bought another 10 skewers. Indian burrito, roasted mutton set, Jamaican braised meat, burritos. Jiang Hai ate everything along the way. The United States was a country of immigrants, so there were all kinds of food here. If it was in New York, one could almost eat all the delicacies without leaving the house. Although Boston was not as prosperous as New York, it was still a big city after all. It was not referring to the size of the city. If it was calculated according to this, Boston might be ranked at the bottom of the cities in the United States. But it was still a metropolitan area and it was next to New York. So here there were basically all the snacks in New York. Jiang Hai was quite satisfied with the food. His mouth was stuffed with food. He ate all the way from the street to the end of the street. If he was not full, he ate from the end of the street to the end of the street. Before Jiang Hai was possessed by the Dragon Ball, he was a foodie. His appetite was not small. Generally, if he ate meat, he would eat at least 2 caddies of meat. After being possessed by the Dragon Ball, his body might be better, so he needed more energy. His appetite directly doubled. In other words, when it came to meat, Jiang Hai was now at least 4 caddies. It was not easy to eat all these snacks in one go. Just like that, he ate from the end of the street to the end of the street, and from the end of the street to the end of the street. After eating twice, he wiped the oil stains on his mouth and was finally full. 2 updates in a row. Please support Xiao Fei. Thank you everyone. Chapter 55. Phew, I'm finally full. Patting his slightly bulging belly, Jiang Hai chuckled and threw the trash in his hand into the trash can next to him. Only then did he have the leisure and time to stop and look at the place where he was. There were many Chinese in the United States, and as the place where the highest universities in the United States gathered, there were even more Chinese in Boston. After all, for the Chinese, education had always been the top priority. Compared with the prosperous but chaotic New York, Boston, the city of universities, was more popular among the Chinese. As long as you went out here, whether it was on campus, on the street, in restaurants, shopping malls, parks, supermarkets, subway stations, etc., you could catch the Wuxia people everywhere, not to mention the Wuxia people's settlement in Chinatown abroad. Some statistics said that the cleanest and tittiest Wuxia city in the United States was Boston's Wuxia City. There were many Wuxia elements here. Walking through the big sign that said, "The world is public," you would officially enter Boston's Wuxia City. Compared with the West Coast that mainlanders preferred, the people who migrated to the East Coast earlier were basically immigrants from Xinjiang or Guangdong province. Therefore, Wuxia City here had a strong Xinjiang style. At a glance, almost most of the people were Chinese, and the shop signs were basically written in traditional Chinese characters. Compared with the legendary New York or other Wuxia City, Boston's Wuxia City was much more peaceful. The Wuxia City here was much more peaceful. Occasionally, the non-Chinese people who flashed by were basically blonde white people. There were almost not too many black people and Middle Eastern people. Of course, this was not absolute. In this world, it was impossible to measure whether a person was a good person or a bad person based on their race. You couldn't say that a race, from birth, was all bad people and there was no good person. This was impossible. In this world there were not so many black and white and there were more gray in the middle. Jiang Hai walked on the street here and his eyes were also looking around. The first impression that Wuxia gave people was eating, so in Wuxia City, there were almost restaurants everywhere. There were seafood restaurants, fast food restaurants, and these were all characteristics of Guangdong province. In addition, there were people from other provinces such as hot pot restaurants. All kinds of stir-fried dishes were also very common here. All in all, this was a food paradise, and besides the restaurants, the most things here made Jiang Hai a little surprised. Because according to Jiang Hai's idea, Wuxia City's most popular must be restaurants, and the second most were probably supermarkets. Although there were a lot of supermarkets, there were not as many of these shops. These shops were almost impossible to see in China, but they had taken root here. These shops were called martial arts centers. Yes, they taught people martial arts. Although it was not clear how attractive the mud control was to the Americans, there were many martial arts schools on the street. Tai Chi, Baji, Hong Quan, I Xing, Tan Tue. Almost all of the martial arts that Jiang Hai had heard of before and those that he had never heard of were here. But if one were to talk about the martial arts school with the most practice, it would be Jeet Kune Do. This martial arts school was created by Bruce Lee, who used Wing Chun as a foundation and combined it with the martial arts that the Zhou clan was good at. It obviously had a great reputation in the US. Although it was not like Taekwondo, Judo, Aikido and other foreign martial arts, it was very effective. However, the results were very extensive. Jiang Hai saw with his own eyes that in the martial arts center, there were many blonde-haired, blue-eyed and dark-skinned children waving their fists with all their might. This made Jiang Hai somewhat curious, and at the same time reminded him of yesterday's fight. Jiang Hai's current physical fitness was new. Yesterday, when he fought against 11 people, he only suffered some superficial injuries. However, those guys suffered heavy casualties. Today he heard that although those guys did not die, they would have to be bedridden for at least 3 to 5 months. Moreover, these guys' crimes were the easiest to convict. The evidence was conclusive and they were definitely guilty. But now, it was up to how the punishment would be decided. According to Moses Adams, murder might not be established, but robbery and intentional kidnapping were definitely not going to escape. The lightest punishment was that these people would have to spend at least 5 years in prison before they could be released. Jiang Hai curled his lips at such a punishment. He felt that it was a little light. However, when he thought about it, according to the temperament of the prison in the United States, after these young boys went in, their chrysanthemums would at least become sunflowers. Thinking of this, Jiang Hai's mentality calmed down a little. Now that he saw the martial arts school, he suddenly remembered the fight yesterday. Although his physical fitness was extremely strong, his combat experience and tactics were really lacking. It seemed that it was time for him to learn. Of course, Jiang Hai did not mean to learn here. The things here were basically just for show. There were very few practical things. When he said to learn, he meant that he would go home and learn. Don't forget, his family had Bell Lester, who had just retired from the Triangle State for a year. Although he was a sniper, he should know a lot about close combat as well. Thinking of this, Jiang Hai also stored this matter in his mind and continued to walk around Wuxia City. Traveling was basically like this. Walk and stop, look at the surrounding buildings and taste the street food. Although it was only Jiang Hai alone, he had a lot of fun. Unknowingly, he had finished walking around this small area. At this time, Ai Dehua also called him and told him that the boat was almost finished. Now they were testing the water to see if there were any leaks. If there were no leaks, they could be pulled back by car. Hearing Ai Dehua's words, Jiang Hai's Boston tour came to an end. Following the route in his memory, he returned to Little Italy and returned to the port. Sure enough, the three boats had already begun to enter the water. They were testing almost at the same time. Looking at the three small boats that were like a sharp sword, cutting through layers of waves and pushing forward, Jiang Hai couldn't help but want to eat. In fact, if you knew how to drive a car, you could basically drive it. However, if you wanted to drive it on the sea, you would need a separate license. However, after Jiang Hai bought it, he would play in his own manner. This was something that others could not control. After all, it was his private territory. Even if he drove a tank in his own territory, others could not control it. Boss, do you want to come down and play? At this time, Ai Dehua drove the deck boat to the shore and said to Jiang Hai with a smile. Okay. Hearing Ai Dehua's words, Jiang Hai laughed, then exerted his feet and jumped directly into the deck boat. This shocked everyone next to him, even Ai Dehua was shocked. Originally he wanted to drive to the shore, fix the boat, and then let Jiang Hai get down with a plank. He didn't expect Jiang Hai to jump down directly. Boss, this is too dangerous. After feeling the boat shake for a while, it slowly stabilized. Ai Dehua couldn't help but say to Jiang Hai speechlessly. Doing this is indeed very dangerous. Oh, I know. Next time slow down a little. Okay, hurry up and drive a lap. Let me see how fast this boat can go. At this time Jiang Hai, who had stabilized his center of gravity, also smiled awkwardly. He was a little too careless. This boat was not as stable as he thought on the water. At this time, hearing Ai Dehua's words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smile slightly awkwardly, but then he changed the topic. He wanted to see how fast this boat can go. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Jiang Hai also smiled. He pushed the gear lever and the deck boat was at full power, rushing straight to the distant sea. Feeling the suddenly strong sea breeze, Jiang Hai couldn't help but exclaim, "This boat is really beautiful." After playing around in the shipyard for more than an hour, Jiang Hai personally sat on all three ships. Only then was he finished. Then he rented a truck that was specially used by the shipyard to pull boats. Jiang Hai and Ai Dehua drove the truck and took them back to their manor. In fact, these three boats were not too heavy. Jiang Hai's F-750 could also be pulled. But Jiang Hai's car didn't have a drawbar installed, so he couldn't pull it for the time being, so he could only rent the shipyard's truck. But fortunately Jiang Hai's order was more than 1,000,000 yuan, so the rental was waived by Dalton. But the driver had to make a trip, so Jiang Hai didn't care about it. After driving the truck back to the manor, Jiang Hai and the others began to get busy again. Only Burke and Philip, the two old men, were left in the cowshed. The others came to help unload the boats to the shore. Although Jiang Hai's gravity wharf had been built for more than 10 years, it was still very stable. At least this year they didn't have to worry about it. It was already night by the time they got the boats into a dock that had been built long ago next to the wharf. After giving the driver a tip of $200, Jiang Hai sent him out of the manor. At this time he was so hungry that his chest was sticking to his back. Fortunately Mrs. Philip had already prepared dinner, so Jiang Hai went to Philip's small villa and stuffed himself with food. After dinner he returned to his villa. Jiang Hai lay on his huge bed. He casually took out a small notebook from the bedside table. There were some words recorded in the notebook. It was mainly divided into two parts. One part was the steps of the manor's development that he and Luo Binci had studied together. Recruiting people, buying a car, buying a cow, buying a horse, buying a boat. Most of these main expenses had been ticked, which meant that they had already been bought. Today Jiang Hai ticked another tick after the boat, which meant that this thing was already done. The only thing that was lacking now was fish seedlings. But according to Ai Dehua, it was too late to release the fish seedlings now. It was better to wait until next year. Moreover, Jiang Hai didn't have much money to buy the fish seedlings. The other part of the notebook recorded his expenses. Looking at the strings of numbers written in it, Jiang Hai couldn't help but feel a headache. Today's first update. I was cooking and forgot. I'll send it to everyone right away. Chapter 56. Selling gems, a total of 332. 15 million. Buying the manor, 280 million. 52. 25 million left. Looking at the records in the notebook, Jiang Hai couldn't help but rub his temples. It seemed that he didn't have enough money. Although he knew that the manor's income in the future would definitely be more than what was on the books, it seemed that he had overspent. Jiang Hai had more than 52 million left after buying the manor. He had spent more than 20 million on cattle, various things, renovations, cars, horses, and so on. Including the boat he had bought today, he had spent almost 6 million. Last night he had given the lawyer 2 million in a moment of impulse, so that was 7 million. Including the money for the cattle, he had spent almost 30 million. He still had about 20 million left. For the expenses of the 7 people under him, he spent more than $5,000 a week, $250,000 a year, almost $260,000. He had to provide the money for food. In the United States, there was no such thing as fooling the workers. Moreover, they were cowboys, so he had to provide them with meat every day. If the food cost was $20 a day including himself, it would be $180 a day. Not to mention that they also had to eat some snacks. It would be $200 a day, which would be $73,000 a year. In addition, he would occasionally treat them generously, which would be $100,000 a year. In other words, he would have to pay nearly $400,000 a year just for labor alone. Including the gas for the car and the diesel for the boat, which he had bought with high horsepower, he would have to spend at least $10,000 a month, and another $100,000 a year. Also, he had to buy feed for the cattle and horses and so on. Just the food for these people, the horses, and the wages for these workers. Jiang Hai estimated that he would have to spend more than $1 million a year. In addition, he had to pay taxes. Although he hadn't turned a profit yet, the land use tax didn't matter whether he was profitable or not. This was close to $4 million a year. There was also Social Security and medical insurance. Jiang Hai didn't care for Social Security in the United States, but he wasn't allowed to pay for these two things. Medical insurance was extremely important in the United States. If you didn't have medical insurance, you would have to spend thousands of dollars to treat a cold here. If you broke a tooth, congratulations, it would be impossible to fix it without tens of thousands of dollars. Therefore, under such circumstances, Jiang Hai was also very helpless. Thinking about it this way, the 20 million he had on him could still be used. Less than 14 million might seem like a lot, but it was obvious that 14 million was really not a lot compared to 330 million. Most importantly, because of the improvement of the pasture, Jiang Hai had a lot of confidence in his cattle. If he wanted to make a lot of money, he would probably have to raise fish on his agenda. But fry, that was very expensive. According to AI de Hua, there were several ways to raise fish or raise seafood. The first was the most common way. The fish raised like this were destined to not sell for a high price, but the cost of raising them was very low. One only needed to buy some nets, enclose the fish together, and feed them regularly. However, because these fish didn't exercise, it was difficult to sell them for a lot of money due to the excessive fat content in their bodies. The second way was free-range farming. That was to set up some nets at the border of one's own fishing ground. Then, in the world of the nets, an independent small world would be established, and a special ecosystem would be established here to feed the fish. However, there were some problems with this kind of feeding, and that was that it would have a lot of impact on the ecological balance of the seabed. The third way was to completely free-range farming. Similarly, some nets would be set up outside the fishing ground to prevent the fish from escaping. Then, a small food chain would be established at the bottom of the sea. Raising fish naturally required raising big fish. Take codfish for example. This kind of fish ate shrimps when they were young, so a lot of shrimps had to be raised in the sea. When they grew up, they ate squid and octopus, so a lot of them had to be raised. A food chain was formed underwater, and the fish raised were the fish at the top of the food chain. In this way, the quality of the fish would be the best, but there was a problem. It was too expensive to raise fish this way. Take the smallest shrimp as an example. At present, the best quality and highest energy shrimp in the world was the Antarctic scaled shrimp, but this shrimp was in the Antarctic. The cost of transporting it was more expensive than the shrimp itself, so the loss outweighed the gain. But to make up for it, it was also good to use the Arctic scaled shrimp. This kind of shrimp was very sweet and nutritious, but it was relatively large, so it was mainly fed with shrimp fry. After a batch of shrimp grew up, new shrimp fry were needed to feed the fish. This kind of shrimp fry was 80 cents per kilogram, and a ship of 10 tons of shrimp ferry could supply 20,000 codfish fry for half a month. Jiang Hai's fish farming was not like cattle farming. There were 20,000 fish and nothing could be seen. The coastline of Jiang Hai's manor was extremely long. There were 300,000 fish fry here, and not even a splash could be seen. In that case, the fry would have to eat 300 tons of shrimp every month. 1 ton was $800, so 300 tons would be $240,000, and that was just for a month. The squid and octopus cubs would also have to be bought, which were even more expensive. Codfish was different from other fish. It took time for them to grow. Unlike ordinary freshwater fish that could be fished out in a few months, codfish tasted better the longer they were grown. They could grow up to 10 years, 1 or 2 meters long. So basically, they would raise them for about 1 or 2 years before starting to harvest them. However, the cost of feeding codfish for a month was about $30,000 to $40,000. In other words, the cost of feeding codfish alone was at least $10 million, not to mention the cost of the seaweed. This was not even the cost of the fish fry. Thinking of this, Jiang Hai could not help but shake his head with a bitter smile. It seemed that the remaining $20 million in his hands was not enough to do anything. I have to find a way to get some money to spend. Jiang Hai clicked his teeth and muttered in a low voice. Woof woof. Perhaps they heard Jiang Hai's words. Xiao Bai and Jiang Hai, who were lying on their stomachs in his room, could not help but jump up. They lay on their stomachs beside Jiang Hai's bed and looked at Jiang Hai strangely. They thought that Jiang Hai was talking to them. What are you doing? Go down. Jiang Hai patted the two big dogs' heads with his foot and said angrily. When they heard Jiang Hai's words, the two big dogs looked at each other, lay down again and continued to watch the TV in front of them. Jiang Hai fell into deep thought. In fact, there were still many ways for Jiang Hai to earn money. Not to mention those illegal businesses, he now had a big family business and there was no need to mess around. He could think of many legal businesses, all of which were related to the sea. Don't forget that Jiang Hai can now move freely in the water, and he is not affected by the water pressure, so he can explore the deep sea. Whether it is to find oil fields or natural gas, it is a good way to make a fortune. However, this method is easy to attract the attention of the state, and the loss is not worth it. There are also ways that do not attract the attention of the state, such as salvaging some sunken ships. The cultural relics inside are probably worth a lot. Gold in troubled times, antiques in prosperous times. Although there are still sporadic wars in the world, the main few places, North America, Europe, and East Asia, are all very stable, and these are the main places to earn money. If he goes to the sunken ship to get some antiques or cooperate with others to salvage the ship, then he will make a lot of money. A valuable sunken ship is worth at least 1 billion or 800 million. It is not too much for him to get a share of 100 million. When he salvages 5 or 6 ships a year, that is $500 or $600 million, and it is the kind that does not need to be taxed. How free it is. However, there is a problem. Jiang Hai's current strength is only the limit of human beings. If he encounters a shark, a king squid, or a whale in the sea, he will not be able to defeat them. Don't look at how Jiang Hai's courage is not small when it comes to fighting. But in the sea he really doesn't have any confidence. He was a person who cherished his life very much. Last time, when he saw a shark in the distance in his own fishing ground, he immediately swam back. Now he was going to salvage a ship in the deep sea. He was a little scared just thinking about it. This idea, I have to at least wait until I reach 3 levels. In the small notebook, Jiang Hai drew 3 and then a big circle. He will not risk his life. He is not willing to go to natural resources such as oil and natural gas, because it is easy to make a wedding dress for other countries. He also does not dare to salvage sunken ships and antiques, because he is afraid that he will be swallowed by aquatic animals. Under the policy of being afraid of wolves in front and tigers in the back, Jiang Hai scratched his head hard. It seems that there is really no way to make money. Thinking of this, he can't help but sigh and lean directly on his bed. I don't want to open source. It seems that I can only think of ways to reduce the flow. In the future, except for food, other things will be simpler. Those imaginary yachts, planes, and foreign horses, I will say goodbye to you for the time being. Muttering to himself, Jiang Hai smiled self-deprecatingly. It is said that men become bad when they are rich. In fact, this is also relative, mainly related to the environment. If Jiang Hai lives in the city after he has money, he will inevitably come into contact with some people of the upper class. When these guys come, famous brands, beautiful girls, sports cars, planes, and yachts will all come. But now, he does not know such friends and he does not know those messy places. So he is just thinking about it. A long time ago, an ancient person once said that it is impossible for an otaku to commit a crime, and it is difficult for them to become bad. It couldn't be a crime because they were waiting to read the new episodes and novels every week. It was impossible for them to turn bad because there was no soil for them to turn bad. It wasn't easy for them to turn bad if they stayed at home all the time. Oh, I am really a little self-destructive. How can there be such a useless rich man like me? He sighed helplessly and accepted his fate. Second update, continuously delivered. Please support Xiaofei's new book. If you don't have a collection, please help. Chapter 57. Hiss. Standing in front of the sunny windowsill, Jiang Hai stretched. Although the weather outside was a little cold, it was still warm inside the house. Jiang Hai's room, no, it could be said that all the rooms in Jiang Hai's house had independent heating facilities. It was different from the coal burning in the northeast of China during winter, which caused serious pollution. In the United States, there were basically 2 types of geothermal heat. One was natural gas and the other was electricity. Especially electricity. This was a new energy source that had just emerged in recent years. In the United States, water and electricity bills were not considered expensive. Of course, if you multiplied everything by 6, then other than the hamburgers, everything here would be expensive. After all, the money earned here was in dollars, and the money spent here was also in dollars, so it had to be calculated in dollars. The water and electricity bills in the United States were different from state to state. After all, some places were rich in water, so it was cheap. Some places, such as California or Phoenix, were deserts, so the water bills were naturally expensive. As for the electricity bills, they were basically the same. It was cheap where there was electricity, and expensive where there was no electricity. Although the living resources in Boston where Jiang Hai lived were more expensive, to be honest, the water and electricity were not expensive. After all, the freshwater resources here were very rich. Although there were no big rivers, there were too many small rivers. The underground water was also very rich, so the water bills were very cheap. According to the calculation here, it was $0.3 per cubic foot. In terms of tons, it was about 50 cents per ton, which was equivalent to 50 cents. It was indeed not expensive. Electricity was even cheaper. There were a total of 117 nuclear power plants in the United States. Among them, there were as many as 2 in the Boston area. Therefore, the electricity here was very cheap, about 8 cents per kilowatt hour. The government had a policy on gas. In the winter, many people still burn gas, so the price was very low, about 0.6 cents per cubic foot. In the summer, it was slightly more expensive, but it did not exceed 2 cents per cubic foot. All in all, the price of these things here was indeed very cheap. When Jiang Hai rebuilt his house, he replaced all the gas floor heating with electricity. After all, this kind of floor heating was safer. If the gas ran out, it would really be out of gas. Although it was slightly more expensive, safety was the most important thing. Second, there was no smell. Third, it was more environmentally friendly. But then again, the electricity bills here were very cheap, which was the most important thing. His entire villa was powered 24 hours a day, which meant that it consumed around 200 kilowatts of electricity every day. Even if it was 3 months or 100 days in the winter, it would only consume 20,000 kilowatts of electricity, which was only $1,600 in US dollars. It wasn't expensive at all. Including the small villas next to him and the ones where Robbins and the others lived, it would only cost about $2,000 a winter. But he slept very comfortably. Walking barefoot on the ground, Jiang Hai yawned. He didn't want to get out of bed. Boom. Seeing Jiang Hai's comfortable appearance, Goldie and Xiao Bai, who were lying at the door, could not help but bark. Jiang Hai glanced at them anxiously and could not help but pat his forehead. It was a little cold last night, so he closed the door and slept. These guys must have wanted to go to the bathroom for a long time. However, after drinking Jiang Hai's blood, why did it sound so awkward, but it was really his blood, these 2 dogs had indeed become a lot smarter. He only needed to say it once and they knew not to go to the bathroom in the room. Now, even if they wanted to pee, they would hold it in. Let's go. After putting on a simple coat and shoes, Jiang Hai opened the door. As soon as the door opened, the 2 dogs rushed out, and Jiang Hai followed them out to prepare breakfast. However, before he turned into the kitchen, Jiang Hai saw Belle driving an all-terrain vehicle at this time, pulling a large cart of hay behind it, heading in the direction of the cowshed. Since Jiang Hai moved here, he had only been to the cowshed a total of 5 or 6 times. Every time he went in, he had to endure the stench. He was indeed not cut out for work, but fortunately he was more at ease. Recently, the lawn of the manor had basically been improved by him. Whether it was fresh grass or dried grass, the energy in it was quite good. After eating the cows, not only did the meat taste better, but they also became smarter. Although they were not as smart as directly absorbing blood, at least they were not too noisy, and it was not easy to cause a ruckus. This made Luo Binsi and others who were ready to do a big job, a little speechless. It was almost like when a pregnant woman went to a family with a child and asked how to take care of the child. The family told her that the child was very noisy. Basically, the child slept for less than 3 hours every day and was always crying. This made her 200% mentally prepared. But after the child was born, you found that the child hardly cried, the sitting time was accurate, and when it ate, it was normal, not sick, not in a mood, which made your initial preparations go to waste. But in any case, the cattle were so convenient and they were also very happy. Now they are ready to observe for 2 more days, and then they are ready to start grazing. Although it is almost winter now, the grass on Jiang Hai's pasture is still green, and it can be grazed for a few more days. Wait until it snows. As for the winter feed, it has already been prepared. Boss, good morning. Seeing Jiang Hai, Belle couldn't help but smile and wave to Jiang Hai. Hey. Belle, wait a minute. Seeing Belle's happy look, Jiang Hai couldn't help but stop him. What's the matter, boss? Boss. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Belle also stopped the car and asked strangely. Belle, weren't you from the Triangle State? Then do you know any fighting techniques? Can you teach me? Looking at Belle, Jiang Hai hurriedly said, now they are busy, it's better not to make trouble. Oh, okay, I'm not too busy now. After lunch I'll come and teach you. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Belle didn't hesitate and nodded in agreement. This made Jiang Hai's original idea of spending money extinguish. Of course, he knows that in the United States, everything is about money. Although Belle didn't mention it, he still needs to prepare first. That's okay, what do I need to prepare? Hearing Belle agree, Jiang Hai also asked happily. Don't eat too much, 80% full is enough. Boss, 70% full is enough, just wear a set of loose sportswear. After thinking about it, Belle smiled and said to Jiang Hai in front of him. Hearing Belle's words, Jiang Hai also nodded. Then I'll go first. Seeing that Jiang Hai has understood, Belle waved to Jiang Hai and then drove away. After he left, Jiang Hai went back to wash his face and brush his teeth. After everything was done, he casually made some food at home and then found a set of sportswear. Compared with other rich people, Jiang Hai's clothes are much simpler. After all, in his bones he was still an ordinary loser. Those donkeys, IMO, Fantasia and the like, he didn't dare to be interested in them. Those casual clothes and suits, Jiang Hai's feelings towards them were ordinary. He didn't feel anything about creating the feeling of a successful person. Therefore, after he became rich, he went to buy a lot of clothes. However, he only bought 3 types of clothes. One was for wearing at home and the other was for sportswear. In the past, he didn't dare to buy Nike because it was too expensive. However, after he arrived in the US, he specifically chose to buy this. UA is actually not bad, but UA's size is small and he doesn't like it very much. In addition to these 2 kinds of clothes, he bought a lot of outdoor clothes, hiking pants, hiking shoes, jacket, and so on. He also likes these. Of course, in fact, according to Robbins, Jiang Hai should also have a set of denim clothes. So he also bought a set, but after buying it, it seemed that he only wore it once and never wore it again. The tassels on the pants and the waistband looked really stupid to the point of making people's hair stand on end. At least for now, it is difficult for him to accept. Of course, if it is such a party, he doesn't mind wearing it. After changing into a loose sportswear, Jiang Hai first went to the cow shed to take a look. When there were 5,000 cows, the stench was already overwhelming. Now that there are 20,000 cows, the smell is even stronger. Even people like Robbins who work here are afraid of being poisoned. After all, farts contain methane, and cows are one of the animals most willing to fart. Generally speaking, farts are produced because of the sugar and fiber in the food. These things are the food of E. coli bacteria. After eating these things, the bacteria will produce farts. Cows need to regurgitate these things. Every time they regurgitate a piece of food, they will produce a new fart. Therefore, global warming and the like are inseparable from cows. Even if the place is ventilated, the smell is still unbearable. If they are locked up, Jiang Hai's cows will probably be suffocated to death by tomorrow. He came here to see the cows, but more importantly, he came to see his horse. When he first bought a horse, he specially bought a Shire horse. Although it is not a purebred, it is still quite big. After the horse arrived at the farm, it was considered to be under Jiang Hai's command. Every day, whenever Jiang Hai has time, he will come over to feed it some grass and carrots. Of course, these things are also added. As for the other horses, sometimes he will also give them some, but the amount is not much. When the huge horse saw Jiang Hai coming from afar, it was already happy in the stable. All right, let's eat. Jiang Hai walked over and patted the huge horse's neck with a smile. Then he took the prepared food and began to feed the horse. After playing with the huge Shire horse for a while, Jiang Hai looked at the time and returned to Mrs. Philemon's place. After lunch, he called Belle and sat in the villa to wait for him. Today's update was 2 chapters consecutively. In the book review section, there were people who said that Xiao Fei's early chapters were too big and would be easy to fail. However, Xiao Fei wanted to say, you didn't see the outline of Xiao Fei's novel and didn't see the arrangement of the plot. Do you think I won't fail just because you say so? Whether the results are good or not, at least the word count of the novel is not a problem at all. As long as you have confidence in Xiao Fei will continue to write. Please support Xiao Fei and collect more. Please, everyone. Chapter 58. Hi, boss. About 1 o'clock in the afternoon, Belle walked in from outside the door with a smile. He skillfully changed out of the pair of riding boots still stained with cow dung at the door and put on a pair of sneakers he brought before walking into the villa. "Hey, I've been waiting for you for a long time, shall we start now?" Seeing Belle's arrival, Jiang Hai immediately said with a smile. "Yes." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the two also came to the training room that Jiang Hai specially built. It was specially built by the former owner of this house. Because it was well protected, Jiang Hai didn't add anything here. After all, those dumbbells and barbells are made of metal. They won't break even after 8 or 10 years, not to mention they are not stained with water and there is almost no rust. Only the treadmill, mountaineering machine and the like are broken, but Jiang Hai usually doesn't use these things. If they break, he throws them away. He didn't buy new ones. Instead, he emptied a huge space in the room and put a cushion in the middle. Originally, he thought that if he finds a girl in the future she can practice yoga here, but now there is no girl so he will use it first. "Boss, tell me first, what do you want to practice?" When he came here, Belle patted the dust on his pants and sat directly on the cushion and asked Jiang Hai. He said this because he wanted to see how far Jiang Hai wants to practice. Of course, it's the most powerful. However, considering his physical fitness, Jiang Hai didn't even think about it. "That's very hard, but I think with the boss' physical fitness, it shouldn't be a problem. What does the boss know about fighting and fighting?" Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Belle nodded with a smile. It seemed that it was not beyond his expectations. "Fighting and fighting, do you mean the kind?" "I know, of course, the most famous one is our Wuxia's Wushu, Korea's Taekwondo, Japan's Judo, Karate, and Muay Thai and boxing, and the recently popular kickboxing, that UFC. I have seen it on TV." Hearing Belle's words, Jiang Hai thought for a moment and said, "Well, what you said counts, but it doesn't count. The Wushu, Taekwondo, Karate you mentioned, in fact, can only be regarded as performance events now. They don't have enough lethality. UFC is a sport, not a Wushu. The only high lethality technique you mentioned here may only be regarded as Muay Thai." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Belle laughed. Although it is the era of firearms, the armies of various countries, especially the special forces, also attach great importance to fighting skills. For example, I know that the special forces of Wuxia do not practice Wushu but Sanda. Among them, the fiercest standing attack is Muay Thai, and the strongest leg attack is Kyokushin Karate. Well, this is also a kind of karate, but it is mainly used to knock down the enemy, and its lethality is amazing. Boxing is also a very strong technique, but it does not protect the lower body, so it is not very practical. The ground strangulation fighting skills are mainly divided into two kinds, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and Japanese Judo, both of which are based on joint skills, giving people a chance to turn defeat into victory. Seeing Jiang Hai's curious gaze, Belle continued to introduce. He mainly introduced the so-called fighting skills of these countries. Of course, the military version is different from the civilian version. "What is the strongest?" Hearing Belle's introduction, Jiang Hai's mind slowly sketched out a picture of a fight. "The strongest? According to the words of your country's Jack Lee, there is no such thing as the strongest fighting technique, only the strongest grandmaster of combat." That's a bit of an exaggeration. In fact, there is still a strongest fighting technique in our country. It's the Soviet Russia's Sambo. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Belle also became serious and said with a serious face, "Sambo?" Hearing Belle's words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but be stunned. "What is Sambo?" To be honest, no matter what he said, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, Judo, Muay Thai, Sanda, boxing and so on, he has heard of them, but this Sambo he really hasn't heard of it. As if seeing Jiang Hai's doubts, Belle here couldn't help but explain to him. Sambo is a fighting skill from Soviet Russia and Europe. It was probably developed in the 1920s to the 1930s. Before that, the strongest fighting skill has always been Mongolian wrestling. In fact, it is the same now, but we can't learn Mongolian wrestling. Let's talk about Sambo first. Belle heard Jiang Hai's words and said slowly, "Although Sambo is not famous, it has always been famous in the fighting world. Before 1950, Sambo mainly developed in Soviet Russia, and after 50 years, it began to enter the international arena. In 1957, it won 2 games with the Hungarian judo team, 47-1, and won the final victory. It was no longer a game, it was a crushing. 2 years later, it won again in the game with the German judo team. In the early stages of the Olympic Games in Japan, Soviet-Russian Sambo athletes defeated the Czech Olympic judo team with judo rules, and then defeated the judo European champion French team. The Soviet Union was known as the fighting nation, and the Sambo played a significant role in this. The only thing that could contend against the Sambo was the legendary Mongolian wrestling. It consisted of over 300 throwing and kicking techniques, and it was known as the strongest fighting technique on the ancient battlefield. Different from the skills mentioned earlier, Mongolian wrestling is a real killing skill. It is not like the current skills which are mainly used to subdue opponents. After all, on the ancient battlefield, using fists and kicks to attack is tantamount to self-harm, and fighting on the ground is tantamount to suicide. This is because when you use crucifix on the ground, the enemies around you can easily chop off your head. The most effective way is to throw the enemy to the ground and then finish him off. Therefore, in terms of the excitement of watching, Mongolian wrestling is not good enough, and the arena is not good enough. But in terms of fighting to the death, Mongolian wrestling is the best. In the World Cup of Sambo, the only thing that can compete with Soviet Russia is Mongolian wrestling. They have won 19 championships in total. Their fighting ability is really terrifying. After listening to Bel's introduction, Jiang Hai's eyes became brighter and brighter. Then, are we learning wrestling or Sambo now? Looking at Bel, Jiang Hai asked anxiously. What we are going to learn now is Israeli fighting skills. Looking at the anxious Jiang Hai, Bel chuckled and said slowly, what the hell is that? Hearing Bel's words, Jiang Hai's face suddenly collapsed. Why did they talk for so long so lively and not learn these things? If they don't learn these things, what's the point of talking so much? Boss, I'm just a sniper. If it is not necessary, I don't need to fight with the enemy, so I only know this. The main reason why I talk so much to the boss is to tell the boss about the main fighting skills in the world so that the boss can be prepared. Seeing Jiang Hai's expression, Bel chuckled and said to him, then okay, Israel it is. Gritting his teeth, it is better than nothing. Jiang Hai is still ready to learn. However, don't be fooled by the fact that Israel's fighting techniques sounded easy to bully. In fact, this fighting technique was also very famous internationally. Israel's fighting techniques were also called Mega. It was a compulsory fighting technique for the Israel Defense Forces, military and law enforcement forces. At the same time, it was widely used all over the world. It was also a compulsory course for the FBI in the United States. Watching the cool fighting skills and tricks on TV, in fact, most of them are extracted from Israeli fighting skills. This is also a fighting skill that is easy to learn but difficult to master. According to Bel, the first lesson that everyone in the Delta Rapid Reaction Force had to learn was the basic combat skills from Israel. After mastering this, they would be able to master firearms and driving. After that, they would be assigned to different classes and configurations. Generally speaking, although snipers also know fighting skills, they are not specialized in it. Explosives and ammunitionists are the strongest in fighting because they are the easiest to fight with the enemy in close quarters, and they also need to use their hands to protect their comrades. Under Bel's guidance, Jiang Hai began to learn from him. All martial arts or whatever, in fact, the beginning is learning. Jiang Hai is the same. You can't expect to become a super master the next day after learning it today. This is unrealistic. Before Jiang Hai started, he always thought that Israeli fighting skills are weak just from the name. He estimated that its combat effectiveness was similar to that of Muay Thai. But after coming into contact with it, he found out. In fact, this fighting ring is not as simple as he imagined. Israeli fighting skills can be valued by the world leader of the United States, so naturally, it has its own unique system. This fighting skill is very flexible. It is mainly based on the actual situation to judge the actual fighting style. It has a 360-degree defense including punches, kicks, grabs, hugs and joint skills. This surprised Jiang Hai. During the fight with Bel, although Jiang Hai's strength, speed, agility and stamina were much better than Bel, but after the fight, his best result was that he could only last for about 10 minutes before being defeated. This made Jiang Hai more curious about the fighting skill itself, but at the same time he was more curious about Bel. After about an hour of learning, Jiang Hai and Bel were a little tired, so they sat on the carpet to rest. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Jiang Hai could not help but ask Bel his doubts. Bel, to be honest, your strength is not bad and you retired from the Delta. I guess that when you retired, there should be a lot of departments looking for you. Why do you want to come back to be a cowboy? With his hands supporting his weight behind his back, Jiang Hai looked at Bel beside him. He was really curious. Oh, why is the boss suddenly so interested in me? I don't like men, haha, I'm just joking. Well, speaking of which, when I first retired from the army, there were indeed a lot of people who came to me, including the FBI, the CIA, the Massachusetts Special Police Force, and the New York Police Department, etc. The treatment was really good. Of course, if you really want to talk about money, it's more of a private nature. Being a bodyguard for those rich people is a very profitable business. Looking at Jiang Hai's ceiling, Bel chuckled and said to Jiang Hai, "Today's second update, continuously delivered. Chapter 59. Hey Belle, I heard that you taught the boss how to fight in the afternoon. How did the boss do? A burst of laughter came from Jiang Hai's villa. Because they fought all afternoon, Jiang Hai was very tired and Belle was also very tired. Jiang Hai offered to give him money, but Belle did not accept it. His goal was an Xbox bought by Jiang Hai. Although this thing is not cheap, it is only a few $100s in the United States. Jiang Hai knew that Belle did this intentionally, so in order to thank him, he was going to treat him to a meal. Later he thought about it and decided to treat one person or two people. Besides, he doesn't know how to cook. So he called Mrs. Philemon directly and asked Mrs. Philemon to come over as the chef. He treated everyone to a meal. These cowboys didn't learn the word polite from Jiang Hai. As soon as the work was over, they all came over. Everyone was noisy and lively. After chatting for a while, Ai Dehua here led the topic to Jiang Hai's martial arts training this afternoon. Sure enough, after hearing his words, everyone was very concerned about this incident. Wow, a martial arts genius. Hearing Ai Dehua's words, Belle said exaggeratedly, "Haha, don't flatter me, I was beaten very badly this afternoon." Hearing Belle's words, Jiang Hai was the first to laugh, shook his head and said helplessly, "He was telling the truth, he was thrown at least a dozen times this afternoon. Just starting, before you beat people you have to learn how to take a beating. This is a compulsory course." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Robbins here also smiled and encouraged Jiang Hai. Hearing what Robbins said, Jiang Hai also smiled and nodded. But his eyes looked at Belle next to him, and Jiang Hai's mind couldn't help but go back to this afternoon when he asked Belle. Indeed, just as Jiang Hai thought, those who retired from the Delta Force, even those who were fired, as long as it wasn't because of a matter of principle such as treason, they would be very popular. In addition, Belle had actually performed well except for the last time when he disobeyed orders. So when he retired, there were indeed a lot of people who threw him an olive branch. But Belle didn't accept it because he was tired of wandering and killing people everywhere. In the United States, Jiang Hai, a foreigner, knows the nature of the FBA and CIB, even if he is not an insider. And those police stations, special forces and the like, low income is one thing, but they also kill people. As for Belle, he was already tired of killing people. Being a bodyguard meant that he would inevitably end up in a firefight. He would rather not have such a life no matter how much he earned. So in the end he turned down all his jobs and returned to his hometown to become a cowboy. It turned out that being a cowboy was not bad. He did not have to worry about food and drink. As long as he worked hard, he earned quite a bit. At least, it was enough to support a bachelor like him. Hearing Belle's words, Jiang Hai also lowered his head and smiled. He didn't expect him to be a pacifist. "Okay boys, no matter how happy you are, you have to eat as usual. Come and try my wife's specialty, lemon cod." At this moment, Philip's signature laughter interrupted Jiang Hai's contemplation. As he walked out of the kitchen with a plate of cod, a fishy smell, coupled with a slightly sour smell, filled the room. "Haha, I can't wait." Looking at the dish, Ai Dehua was the first to eat. He picked up the communal fork, put a piece on his plate and began to eat in big bites. Eating in the United States is different from eating in China. Here the system is divided. Logically speaking, it should be like a Western restaurant, where each person eats a set of food. Of course, gatherings like this are not too particular. The main food will be placed together on the table, and whoever wants to eat can use the communal fork to put it on their plate. At first, Jiang Hai was not used to this, but now he is used to it. After putting 2 pieces of cod on his plate, Jiang Hai also began to cut and eat. Although Mrs. Philemon was dark and plump, she was a very good cook. According to the local tastes in the United States, she can even go out and set up a small stall. The last time Jiang Hai went to Wuxia City in Boston, there were many small stalls there. Many of them were not as good as Mrs. Phillip's cooking. However, Mrs. Phillip did not have such thoughts. In her opinion, she only needed to take care of the house and make money. This kind of mentality is not rare in the United States. There are many full-time housewives in the United States. Although the people in the United States talk about women's rights every day, according to Jiang Hai's understanding, the women's way of thinking is, if I want to go out and work, you have to agree. If I want to rest at home, you have to take care of my family. Well, perhaps it is a little biased, but the general meaning is not too far off. At least, that is what Jiang Hai thinks. The guests and the host enjoyed the meal. After all, in a sense, these people are also the owners of the manor. After everyone finished eating, everyone took the initiative to help Jiang Hai tidy up and then left. Jiang Hai also returned to his room. He teased the 2 big dogs and watched TV, but his mind was thinking about the situation when he learned martial arts during the day. The Israeli martial arts seemed to be quite useful. The next morning Jiang Hai woke up early, which was rare. In fact, on a winter morning, there is nothing more memorable than a warm bed. At least, Jiang Hai thought so before he hugged a girl to sleep. So Jiang Hai usually sleeps until he wakes up naturally. Even if he wakes up, he will stay in bed and play with his mobile phone. He won't get up until about 10 o'clock. But today he got up at 7 o'clock in the morning, which made the two dogs next to him a little uncomfortable. But when Jiang Hai woke up, they also woke up with a yawn. They opened the door and let the two dogs go to the toilet. Then Jiang Hai washed his face and brushed his teeth in the bathroom. He had a simple breakfast and of course breakfast for the two dogs. After everything was done, Jiang Hai changed into sportswear and walked out of the room. According to Belle, although Jiang Hai's physical fitness was very good, the necessary exercise still needed to be done. Running every morning was not only good for the body but also good for the lung capacity. Of course, his so-called morning run was at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. Jiang Hai woke up at 7 o'clock now. It was almost 8 o'clock when he ran. It was not a morning run. However, Jiang Hai came here mainly to exercise and warm up his body. So, he didn't really care about it. Starting from the villa, Jiang Hai ran all the way to the beach. The location of his villa was not far from the beach. He could even clearly see the distant coastline and the golden beach from the second floor. However, there was still a distance to run. On a road that Luo Binsi deliberately opened, Jiang Hai ran to the beach. Luo Binsi didn't stay here for nothing. He paved several roads in the manor. After all, the grass in the manor was a type of forage grass. They grew very tall. When they were at their most luxuriant, they could even grow to waist height. Luo Binsi didn't stay here for nothing. Although it was possible to drive a large vehicle such as a pickup truck, it would be troublesome to walk or drive an all-terrain vehicle. The manor's grass was the main source of food for the livestock. Naturally, it couldn't be cut like a lawn. Therefore, he deliberately opened up several roads in these weeds. They were not very wide, only about 3 meters wide. Only one pickup truck could pass through, and 2 all-terrain vehicles could pass through. One of these roads led to the dock, one led to the cowshed, and one led to the plantation, which was the vineyard and the vegetable garden. But after all, Jiang Hai came too late this time, so there were no vegetables in the vegetable garden. He could only wait until next year. There was also another road that led to the gate. Originally, these roads were just some gravel roads. It was impossible to expect Luo Binsi to have the money to pave them. But this time, Jiang Hai renovated the house and left a lot of stone and planks. He put all of them on these roads. Running on these roads was indeed better than running on gravel roads. At least, it was a lot smoother and he didn't feel panic when stepping on it. Jiang Hai adjusted his breathing while running to the beach at a constant speed. After seeing Jiang Hai run, the 2 big dogs next to him felt a little strange, but they also ran with Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai ran as he walked. Unknowingly, he had already run for more than half an hour. Standing on the soft sand and feeling the biting cold sea breeze, Jiang Hai took a deep breath and prepared himself. Then he began to practice according to what Belle had taught him yesterday. Although the coordination between his hands, eyes, body technique, and steps was still a little rusty, Jiang Hai's eyes were still a little shaky. Jiang Hai practiced very seriously. He practiced for more than an hour. When it was almost 10 o'clock in the morning, he stopped. Then he rested for a while and continued running in the direction of his home. On the way, he made a turn and went to the cowshed. He mainly wanted to see his big horse and give it some food. After that, he went back to rest. After taking a shower, he went to Mrs. Philomon's house for lunch. In the afternoon, he stayed at home to play on the computer and watch TV. In the evening, he went to eat dinner. Just like that, the day ended peacefully. This kind of life was basically for people in a semi-retired state. For those rich people, rich young people, or even people with gold collars and white collars, this kind of life was too boring. In their eyes, what was the point of staying at home all day? If they had this kind of time, they might as well go out and find some excitement. Nice cars, beautiful women, good wine, good food, there were always things that could stimulate you. But for Jiang Hai, this was his nature. A person was not a fish, so how could he know the joy of a fish? For Jiang Hai, this kind of dull and peaceful life was the most comfortable. Please collect, please collect, please collect. Important things have to be said 3 times. Chapter 60. Congratulations, CEO Chi. You've clinched this deal. An old man with white hair looked at the 2 contracts in front of him, then looked at the woman sitting opposite him. He sighed helplessly, then gritted his teeth and signed his name on the 2 contracts as if he had made up his mind. Congratulations to you too. Ueda Technology has now merged with our Chi Group. It will definitely become one of Qi Group's top businesses in the future. Seeing the old man's signature, the beautiful woman sitting opposite him couldn't help but chuckle and say to the old man, "I hope so." The old man sighed and smiled awkwardly. He really didn't know if his decision today was right or wrong. Elder Qin, don't worry. It's not like you haven't seen Director Lu's methods. Yuta will definitely prosper under her leadership. At this moment, a middle-aged man who looked to be in his 40s sat next to him and said with a smile, "Hee, I don't need you to tell me that. I know CEO Qi's methods better than you. Otherwise, I wouldn't have sold Ueda Technology to Qi Group. I have to admit that I'm old now. It's the young people's world now. Oh right, Ueda Technology has been acquired by Qi Group. This is a happy occasion. I'll be hosting a banquet at home tonight. Everyone must come." The old man smiled helplessly, but he quickly composed himself and said to the people sitting there with a smile, "That's what I should do." Hearing the old man's words, the people here laughed. Although Qi Group had acquired 60% of Ueda Technology's shares, it was not originally a listed company. It was a private company. Old man Qin in front of them had 100% of Ueda Technology's shares. Now that he had sold 60%, he still had 40% left. Moreover, if they wanted to hand over the factory and company in good condition, they couldn't do without old man Qin's help. Therefore they had to attend this banquet. Niche Qi. After making an appointment for the evening, everyone dispersed. Qi Li also left the room with her assistant. She went to the underground car park and was about to drive away. However, before she got into the car, she was stopped by someone. Lu Li turned around to look and could not help but smile. The person who called out to her was probably one of her direct subordinates. "Niche Qi, you sure walked fast." The person who came was none other than the middle-aged man who had spoken in the meeting room earlier. "Uncle Zhao, you're walking too slowly. Why did you stop me?" Looking at the middle-aged man in front of her, Qi Li revealed a rare playful expression, but then she looked at the middle-aged man in front of her seriously and asked. This middle-aged man was called Zhao Jianjun. He knew both Qi Li's family and Jiang Hai's family. They used to live in the same neighborhood, but he was younger than Qi Li's and Jiang Hai's parents by more than 10 years. Later on, Qi Li's father resigned to make money, and he followed him. He could be considered a direct descendant of the Qi family. However, because he was injured when he was young, he couldn't have children. Therefore, he had always treated Qi Li as his own daughter. After such a big incident happened to Lu Li, he was still able to take over the company. Qi Li also approved of Zhao Jianjun. As a matter of fact, Zhao Jianjun was now the vice president of the Qi Group. His position in the company was only below Qi Li. It's like this. At the banquet tonight, you have to bring your partner. Do you have anyone in mind? Hearing Qi Li's words, Zhao Jianjun smiled and asked Qi Li. Hearing his words, Qi Li was stunned. "Just bring Yijin. Haven't we lived like this for so many years?" Hearing Zhao Jianjun's words, Qi Li asked curiously. Hearing what she said, the girl with glasses beside her couldn't help but look at Zhao Jianjun. If Jiang Hai knows about this, it's fine. If he doesn't and you always ignore his existence, your reputation will be damaged. Although I know that the marriage with Jiang Hai was a temporary measure, it's not good for you or him if you keep delaying it. After all, I watched Jiang Hai grow up. It's not good for both of you. If you feel that you can get along with Jiang Hai, then you can give it a try. If you feel that you can't get along with Jiang Hai, then you can divorce him at any time. If you feel that you can't talk to your mother, I can help you talk to her. Looking at Qi Li in front of him, Zhao Jianjun said with some hesitation. What is Jiang Hai's identity? How can he be worthy of the president? However, as soon as Zhao Jianjun finished speaking, Qi Li's eyes flashed with a hint of surprise. She really didn't think that Zhao Jianjun wanted to talk to her about this. Seeing Qi Li's hesitant eyes before she could speak, the assistant behind her had already spoken. You shut up. No matter what Jiang Hai's identity is, at least now he is Qi Li's husband. You can't judge him. Hearing the girl's words, Zhao Jianjun frowned and said with a face of displeasure. He had long felt that there was something wrong with this little girl. She was so hostile to Jiang Hai. Could it be that she has a psychological problem? Uncle Zhao is right. I told you that Jiang Hai is my husband. It's not up to you to judge him. Well, Uncle Zhao, I think I understand. I will consider it. Turning back and scolding the assistant next to her, Qi Li turned her head and said to Zhao Jianjun. Zhao Jianjun looked at Qi Li. He didn't know if she really listened to him. But no matter what, as her uncle, he had already said so much. Whether it would work or not, it still depended on the two parties. Take care of yourself. With a sigh, Zhao Jianjun didn't say much. After nodding to Qi Li, he turned and left. After watching Zhao Jianjun leave, Qili also walked into the Maybach park next to them. The driver had been waiting for a long time. After the two got in the car, he started the engine and headed to the company in the city center. Has Jiang Hai contacted me recently? If Zhao Jianjun hadn't mentioned it today, Qili might have almost forgotten her husband and name. But now after listening to Zhao Jianjun's words, she also felt that it was time to change her attitude. Indeed, when they got married, the person Qili loved in her heart was not Jiang Hai. As Zhao Jianjun said, it was just a stopgap measure. Of course, the person she loved in her heart was not the person she used to love. After all, that fellow was the one who had caused the death of her father. Furthermore, he had nearly caused the destruction of her family. This hatred had long destroyed the original appreciation and love. Husband and wife were birds in the same forest. When disaster came, they flew away separately. Not to mention that the two were not husband and wife, so she could be regarded as a period of complete idleness for more than a year. Every day she was afraid that she would think of her father and remember the wrong things she had done, so she had been working hard to make herself forget about love. But after Zhao Jianjun mentioned it today, she couldn't help but want to change. Of course, she still didn't have any good feelings for Jiang Hai, but she wasn't going to kick Jiang Hai away directly. She was going to give Jiang Hai a subsidiary company and let him prove his value. If Jiang Hai really met the standard in her heart, this life, it was not impossible to continue like this. If Jiang Hai couldn't do it, she could just separate the subsidiary company at that time as compensation for Jiang Hai. No matter what, the two were childhood sweethearts. It was not very nice to treat him like this. No, since he made a phone call more than 2 months ago, there has been no news. Hearing Qili's words, although there was some disgust in her heart, the assistant next to her still replied with certainty. This guy hasn't called me for almost 3 months? What did he do? Really, give me the phone. Hearing what the assistant said, Qili frowned. Sometimes women were like this. If you were too enthusiastic, she would hate you. If you stayed far away from her and gave up on her, she would feel uncomfortable. After taking the phone from the assistant's hand, Qili looked at the familiar and unfamiliar number on the screen. After hesitating for a moment, she called. The phone rang about 10 times before it was picked up, but the voice was very dull. Hello? Listening to the weak voice on the other side of the phone, Qili's frown deepened. Really, mud can't support a wall. Hello, this is Qili. It's already 1 o'clock in the afternoon, are you still sleeping? Qili said to the other side of the phone in a deep voice. Qili. I'm going to faint, why did you think of calling me? Listening to the slightly unfamiliar voice on the other side, Jiang Hai couldn't help but rub his head. He got up from the bed and gestured to the 2 dogs lying by the door to continue sleeping. Jiang Hai turned on the bedside lamp. There was a 13-hour time difference between the eastern United States and the imperial capital. In other words, it was now 1 o'clock in the afternoon in the imperial capital, but it was exactly 12 o'clock in the middle of the night in Jiang Hai's place. Don't worry about that for now. Send me your ID number and I'll book the earliest flight for you. I just made a deal and the other party is having a family dinner tonight. I need you to accompany me. Listening to Jiang Hai's somewhat dull voice, Qili said quickly. Hearing Qili's words, Jiang Hai really didn't know whether to laugh or cry. It looks like you didn't go home to take a look, but forget it. I'll be honest with you. I don't think it's a good idea for the two of us to keep relying on each other like this. I'm very grateful that you lent me 400,000 yuan when my family needed money. I've recently earned the money back and left it at home. There's also a divorce agreement that I've already signed. If you have time, you can go back and sign it. It'll take effect then. Leaning on the bed, Jiang Hai laughed at himself. He really didn't know how this woman thought of him, but anyway, it was time for him to make it clear. But there was something strange in his heart. If Qili didn't sign it, then wasn't he not divorced yet? But when he applied for a green card in the United States, it clearly stated that he was divorced. What kind of trick was this? In fact, he also underestimated the immigration unit in the United States. As long as you have money, a secret marriage? A secret marriage would let you live. Today's second update is continuously delivered. Please collect it, please collect it, please collect it. Such an important thing, please remember it in your heart. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.